Chapter 1197. St. Andrews was located in the north of Scotland. The town was named after St. Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland, who was buried there. An old Ford stopped at a manor not far from the town. After that, a group of young men and women got off the car. The car was rented, and the driver drove away slowly. The man and woman looked very young. The man had a gray scarf around his neck, while the woman had dyed her hair short and white. They looked at the entrance of the manor. The manor seemed to have been uninhabited for a long time. The walls were covered with moss, and the iron gate of the gate was mottled with rust. There were no extra buildings nearby. There was only a forest in front of them. The road was winding through the forest, and the North Sea could be seen not far away. Because it was spring, the manor was covered with a thick layer of withered leaves. The smell of the soil, mixed with the smell of the sea, filled every inch of the land. The girl with short gray hair. Nero yawned and looked into the distance. This place was chosen by Miss Maid. But until she arrived, she found that the area here was beyond her expectation. It's too big. I heard that it seems to be one of the properties of Miss Yi. The young man with the scarf next to her looked up at a tall tower in the manor. After a while, he sighed. She's really fucking rich. One of Miss Nero next to him moved her lips slightly when she heard it. How should she put it? Although she used to be one of the 12 immortal generals of the Michael Club and had a lot of activity funds that could be used every year for immortal generals, improving their strength was the most important thing. She didn't feel much about money, but when she heard the description of one of Miss Nero, couldn't help showing a trace of poverty. Taisetsu cheered up. Let's go. The boss should come a few days before the school starts. Miss Yi said that before that. We have to clean up this place. Miss Nero curled her lips and yawned. Don't worry. There's still a whole month. I think there's a good place in the town. Shall we go for a drink? Taisetsu didn't mind drinking. I don't mind. Cleaning work isn't that urgent. But can you really do it? I'm just worried that you don't have enough time. Are you done copying the books? Can you not tell me such a sad story? Let's clean up first. Taisetsu smiled, then lifted Nero's collar and dragged her into the manor. The alarm went off at 8 o'clock. Chun Mingming opened his eyes. The curtains were drawn, but the lamp was still on. He sat up straight and pinched the space between his eyebrows. That night, he fell asleep on the table like this. He glanced at the sketchbook, then closed it and put it back into the drawer. After taking a shower, Chun Mingming opened the wardrobe. The clothes inside only had two simple colors, and they were plain clothes without any patterns. Black and white were arranged neatly. As usual, after washing up, Chun Mingming began to make breakfast for himself. The slippers placed at the entrance of the living room were untouched. Without knocking on his mother's door, Chun Mingming knew that she didn't come back last night. It wasn't that his mother was indecent, but that she put all her passion into work. At this time, Chun Mingming's phone rang. It was Zhou Yuxing. Zhou Yuxing's voice had a trace of tiredness. About your matter, I took time to discuss it with your mother yesterday. Chun Mingming sat quietly and looked at the clock on the wall opposite him. Listen, you're an adult now. You can choose freely. Even your mother can't force you to do something you don't like. Mingming, did you hear me? Chun Mingming said, You also worked all night last night. Zhou Yuxing was startled and frowned. There's a big case recently. It's very urgent. I'm not the only one working overtime. Chun Mingming said indifferently. Have you had breakfast? Not yet. Don't interrupt. This matter can't be done according to your mother's wishes. Go and eat something. You've been up all night. Eat something liquid. It's good for your stomach. I said, don't interrupt. I'm talking to you. Hello. Hello. Chun Mingming clicked on the airplane mode and finished his breakfast bit by bit. Then he cleaned up, washed the dishes, and put them back in the cupboard after drying them. He went out as usual. Morning. Hi. In front of the entrance of the community, a pretty figure suddenly jumped into Chun Mingming's sight. It was Tala. Chun Mingming looked at the girl in surprise. It was spring, and the weather had become much warmer. Today, Tara was wearing a dress. Her legs were straight and wrapped in thick cotton stockings. Then, she wore a white coat and held a cup of coffee in her hand. How did you know I live here? Chun Mingming asked curiously. Tala brushed her bangs and smiled proudly. Didn't I say that I'm a monster? Monsters are omnipotent, don't you know? I said yesterday that I'll look for you today. What do you think? I keep my promise, right? Chun Mingming said indifferently. Did you make a promise? Tala walked forward. The enthusiastic girl naturally held Chun Mingming's arm. I don't have class today. I'll accompany you for a day. Tomorrow, you'll accompany me for a day. Then, I have to work on Saturday and Sunday. Next Monday and Tuesday, I have to study for exams. Chun Mingming opened his mouth and frowned. Tala whispered, I'll accompany you to find that person, and you accompany me on a date. Chun Mingming lowered his head and thought for a while. Where to find him? I've already searched the school. I don't know anything else. You'll have to go to a crowded place. Tala blinked and said, There's a food festival in Dongle Square today. There might be a chance. I'll accompany you. No, I have class. Chun Mingming shook his head. Tala held his arm and walked forward. The girl's voice was unquestionable. You're going abroad. Why do you have class? Come, follow me. I'll make sure you're full. Well, we'll find him. His life was disrupted again. In front of the teaching building. Here's what you want. Zhao Lu turned his head away, but his hand still gave out the thing. There were some beads of sweat on his forehead. In order to get the thing in his hand, he had to get up early and rush for a long time. He ran all the way and barely caught up at the time. Dong Xiaofeng smiled and opened the bag. Not bad. You even brought it with you in a thermal box. You have a bright future. I'll call you if there's anything. With that, Dong Xiaofeng carried the bag and walked up the stairs of the teaching building. Zhao Lu heaved a sigh of relief. He lowered his head and intended to leave. But the other two teammates reached out to stop him. Zhao Lu, don't be in such a hurry. Can you do something for us? Zhao Lu raised his head and said angrily, You don't go too far. You. One of the students raised his mobile phone. The photo on the phone was so irritating that Zhao Li's breathing quickened. He subconsciously wanted to grab it, but the other student grabbed his waist. You? What do you want? The student holding the phone raised his chin, and the student holding Zhao Lu let go of his hand. At the same time, he took out a few stacks of homework from his bag and slapped them on Zhao Li's body. Top student, we need these homework for the next class. Please do it well. What's wrong? You don't want to do it? Take it. Zhao Lu clenched his teeth and held the homework tightly. By the way, the teaching office wants us to write some self-criticism. You'd better write ours in young Master Feng's. The teammate sneered and then patted Zhao Li's face with his phone. Good luck, little puppy. The two left with a smile. In front of the square, there was a sea of people. The smell of food was everywhere. Tala was holding 2 skewers in her hand. She was eating with relish. She seemed to have forgotten that Chun Mingming was beside her. Her eyes were excitedly looking back and forth between the stalls. She would only say, Wow, this is delicious. This one looks pretty good too. I can't eat any more. Only then would she say a few words to Chun Mingming. Chun Mingming shook his head. He supported Tala while looking at the stall owner who was cooking. Then he turned around and left the crowd. Perhaps she would not have felt so uncoordinated if she did not suddenly barge in as part of his plan. He thought, to find that person? If Tala did not suddenly think of it. Chun Mingming felt that he would not think in this direction. There was no doubt that he clearly knew that he did care about that person. It was something he yearned for more. Loneliness, desolation, as if she was drifting away from everything. She was like a fairy walking in the human world, silently watching everything that happened around her. That person seemed to have her own world, but this world did not resist the reality. Silence seemed to be only the surface of that person. The deeper level of her inner strength was what attracted Chun Mingming. But since a certain festival last year, he had not seen that person in the library, and Chun Mingming had finished the last book that she read. It was a book about antique porcelain. Suddenly, Chun Mingming felt dizzy. Tiredness came, but it wasn't because he didn't have enough sleep. Chun Mingming's work and rest were very regular. He also mastered exercise and rest very well, so he didn't think that he would have a lack of mental energy. But in the end, he suddenly closed his eyes and fell to the ground. It was reasonable to say that he should have fallen to the ground, but obviously he did not, because a pair of hands caught him. It was a man in a black suit, Wei Zidao, the 47th one. Wei Zidao glanced at Lu Mingho at this time. Lu Mingho nodded, then pointed at a place in the square, In fact, it was the stairwell. They wanted to ask something from Chun Mingming, so they did not want too many people to see. Of course, they did not know who Chun Mingming was, simply because Chun Mingming was one of the more than 50 breaths on the 8 trigrams bronze mirror. Perhaps these 47 could provide some useful information, or perhaps not. As the number of people investigating increased, and they continued to gain nothing, Lu Mingho even began to question whether this fellow with over 50 auras could really provide anything. The two of them quickly helped Chun Mingming into the shopping mall, and then flashed into the back stairwell. "Let me do it." Wei Zidao put Chun Mingming on the stairs and said, then reached out his hand and began to check with the instrument. The process was very fast, but the instrument did not show anything. Obviously, if the instrument did not make a mistake, the subject was just an ordinary person. "Let's interrogate him," Lu Mingho said directly. Of course, he had high expectations for these 47 targets. It was like a routine work. But at this time, the instrument suddenly jumped. "It's a monster aura." Wei Zidao suddenly turned around. "This guy has a monster aura, but it's very weak. I almost didn't notice it." "He's not a monster." Lu Mingho frowned. Wei Zidao was a new agent, but Lu Mingho was already a middle-level agent. He had dealt with demons many times, and he used to be a temporary disciple of a certain sect. He could tell that most of the demons were demons with his naked eyes. "It's strange." Wei Zidao nodded, then took a deep breath and pressed Chun Mingming's forehead with his hand. But this time, a fierce monster aura suddenly appeared, not from Chun Mingming, but from behind Wei Zidao and Lu Mingho. The reaction of the two was also very fast. Lu Mingho turned around and took out a black metal rod, while Wei Zidao directly pulled out a strange silver and black revolver. "What do you want to do to my boyfriend?" A voice with a hint of anger was heard. At the same time, the two of them saw a young girl wearing a white coat. Tara. At this moment, the girl had something that surprised the two. Her face was covered with a large amount of black and green tattoos that looked like tattoos, and these tattoos were still increasing. At the same time, the place where Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao were standing, or rather, the entire stairwell, had a huge green halo floating on the ground, walls, and stairs. Lu Mingho exclaimed, "Eagle totem?" The green totem circle formation on the ground showed no signs of disappearing. Tala's eyes turned cold. But at this moment, Lu Mingho took out an identification card from his body. Tara frowned, waved her hand, and all the abnormalities disappeared. She hesitated. "You're from the administration?" Lu Mingho nodded, and, at the same time, took out another mirror box and opened it. This was a tool used to identify those Kelowna transcendents who had been registered. Beep beep, search successful. A few lines of words appeared on the small screen. Name, Tara. Race, human/monster hybrid. Occupation, Gerfalcon Witch, high-level monster. Chapter 1198. When Lu Mingho received the notice to come to this city for a mission, he knew that this was definitely not a good job. Not because of the case, but because it was the private land of the Shinryu in Kelowna. If it was only the Shinryu, Lu Mingho was not too worried. After all, he was one of the top consultants of the administration. As long as they did not provoke him, it would be fine, but the problem was that there were too many monsters living in this city. The private land of the Shinryu could be said to be the place with the highest proportion of monsters in the city and the country. So if they wandered around here, they might encounter a monster. In fact, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao had tried to be as careful as possible. When they moved, they tried to avoid the faintly discernible monster aura. But in the end, they still encounter a monster. Moreover, it was a high-level monster and a witch. The offspring of a human and a monster could be very powerful at birth, or they could be powerless because of the imbalance of the bloodlines on both sides. Mixed blood would lead to two extremes. Obviously, the Witch of the Gerfalcon was the type with great power. In the face of a high-level monster, the administration usually needed at least 3 fully armed high-level agents to deal with it. What's more, Tara was a witch. A drop of cold sweat gradually fell down. Lu Mingho was glad that Tara seemed to be the type who was easy to talk to. At least, after proving their identity, she did not take any further action. "What did my friend do?" Those strange tattoos had disappeared. Tara was no different from an ordinary young girl at this moment, but there was still a trace of displeasure in her voice. Friend, isn't he your boyfriend? Wei Zidao subconsciously looked back at Chun Mingming and waited for Lu Mingho's action. This would determine what Wei Zidao would do next. At this time, Lu Mingho took back the metal long whip and smiled. Miss Tara, it's an honor to meet you. In our archives, Miss Tara's record is good. You haven't answered my question. Tara frowned. Lu Mingho waved his hand at this time, and Wei Zidao put down the special revolver that could shoot Taoist bullets. He then briefly explained the cause and effect. This is what happened, Miss Tara. Your friend happened to be in the scent that we were tracking. Therefore, we're just doing our job impartially. Tala was still frowning. After a while, he shook his head and said, I've known him for almost a year. He's just an ordinary person. I can guarantee that. According to what you said, the murderer has the ability, so naturally, it can't be him. There are so many demons in this city. If you don't investigate, aren't you putting the cart before the horse? We also want to investigate, but this time, only he and Wei Zidao were here, and Wei Zidao was still a rookie. 2 middle-level and low-level agents of the administration. In a place like this, which was like a monster's base, they might offend some big boss hiding here. What should they do? In fact, after seeing the body in the detention center, Lu Mingho had the idea of closing the case. Anyway, it was only a villain who died. There was really no need to waste the authorities' resources. Moreover, there were thousands of similar cases where a transcendent was suspected to have seen injustice. The Bureau had accumulated thousands of such cases over the years. If it wasn't for Chang Zhao's death, the two of them would have closed the case and returned to report on their mission. Since Miss Tala is the guarantor, there's naturally no problem. Lu Mingho quickly nodded. I'm sorry about today's matter, but Miss Tala, don't worry. Your friend is just asleep. After all, we're just investigating, and we won't casually harm the safety of citizens. Tala nodded. The relationship between the Transcendent and the administration was quite subtle. Both sides were trying to avoid conflict as much as possible. Sorry to bother you, Miss Tala. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao began to pack up their tools and prepare to leave. Wait a minute, Tala suddenly said at this moment. Leave your contact information. Tala shrugged and said, Aren't you investigating a case? If I have any clues, I can inform you. Didn't you say that assisting the administration with cases can increase the freedom of the demon race citizens? I want to travel to the Sichuan area this summer. Let me tell you, I've almost earned enough points for a visa. Okay, in the administration, there were indeed regulations governing the residence of demons. Under normal circumstances, when a demon chose to live in a certain place, they couldn't leave casually. As for going out, it was even more necessary to register and file. Although there were such regulations, there were many people who didn't abide by them secretly. Lu Mingho didn't expect that this powerful mixed-blood demon was actually a law-abiding guy. After leaving their contact information, they quickly left. But brother Hao, it's a pity. If we were a little tougher, we should be able to interrogate that young man, right? Wei Zidao couldn't help but sigh at this time. Lu Mingho said, Tala seems to be very concerned about this young man. It's not worthwhile to offend her. It's not that we're afraid of her strength, but her identity is more sensitive. Sensitive? Wei Zidao was puzzled. Why? Lu Mingho said seriously, She's a witch, and she's a witch of the Gerfalcon tribe. The eagle totem can be said to be one of the 3 great totems of the grassland. In the grassland, it's not like the inland area. The people there have always believed in totems since ancient times. If she's the spiritual leader of a tribe, it's not a small problem. This tribe didn't refer to the demon race, but the people living in the grassland, perhaps their population was not large, but they were still legal citizens. All right, Wei Zidao nodded, and then opened the Bagua mirror. There's still 7 or 8 guys to be investigated. Let's try to finish it today. Lu Mingho thought for a while and said, If there's still no result, we have to think of another way. When Chun Mingming opened his eyes, what came into his sight was the girl's face under the light. Chun Mingming frowned in confusion. At this time, he was lying on a bench and pillowed on Tala's thigh. The surroundings were relatively quiet. They were not in the square where the food festival was held, but in the rest area behind the square. Chun Mingming wanted to sit up, but Tala pressed his body down and covered his eyes with her palm. The girl's soft voice sounded in Chun Mingming's ears. Lie down for a while, it's good for you. You suddenly fainted just now. Maybe you're not in good health. From the soft palm, there seemed to be a warm feeling, covering Chun Mingming's eyelids. His dizzy and swollen head seemed to be relieved a little. Do you feel better? Tala asked softly. Yes. Chun Mingming answered subconsciously. Do you want to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? Tala's unexpected behavior appeared in front of Chun Mingming once again. Chun Mingming reached out and pressed on Tala's palm that was covering his eyes, and at the same time covered his lips. Hello. Tala lowered her head, and her hair fell down. Yes. Chun Mingming answered softly. Tala smiled and said, Actually, you want me to kiss you, right? Chun Mingming said a joke that was not very funny. Humans have evolved for so long, but I haven't evolved into an animal with a lower body. I guess I've lowered the standard. I'm sorry. Tala still covered Chun Mingming's eyes with her hand, but her voice was getting closer and closer, as if he could feel her breath. Kissing, most of the time, is not necessarily because of sex. It's very likely that you want to be touched, to be acknowledged, and to be known by others. Why? Chun Mingming asked calmly. Tala smiled and said, Because I'm a monster, so I can touch the human's heart. You must be very lonely. She moved her palm little by little to Chun Mingming's lips, and he could see Tala's face clearly again. She was so close, and the sunlight shone on her jade-like face. She finally kissed him. She only kissed him through her palm. At that moment, Chun Mingming was a little flustered, and he could not keep calm. Tala raised her head proudly, looked at him, and giggled, deliberately imitating doesn't mean you can do it. Even if you can understand other people's thoughts, you can't stay in the same world as that person. From the very beginning, you and that person are two separate entities. Chun Mingming opened his mouth slightly. Tala whispered, I can see. In that person's eyes, besides loneliness, there's also longing. But you don't have it. Chun Mingming frowned. Tala said, You can't even see yourself clearly. How can you see people's hearts clearly? Chun Mingming laughed, covered his eyes with his hand, and whispered, Let me rest for a while. Tala reached out and stroked Chun Mingming's head and coaxed him, Good boy. When he woke up again, Tala was gone, but there was a note in his hand, which was left by Tala. I'll go first. Unknowingly, it was already late. Chun Mingming didn't expect that he could sleep for such a long time. Tala didn't leave any more information for him, which gave Chun Mingming a very free and easy feeling. Sitting up, Chun Mingming didn't leave immediately, but quietly thought about something. There were fewer and fewer people in the rest area now. Most of them went to the mall to eat or to go shopping. Until the sky was getting darker and darker, and the lights were on, Chun Mingming closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, there was a person sitting beside him. A person who sold him the silver pistol, Luochio. He just came out of nowhere. Maybe it was because of the call in his heart. Have I seen you somewhere before? Chun Mingming frowned. When we first met, I had this feeling very vague. Luochio smiled. Many times when we see others, we will have a feeling of déjà vu. Chun Mingming subconsciously said, You mean déjà vu phenomenon? Luochio smiled and said softly, Customer, is there anything you need from me? Try. Chun Mingming thought for a while. Just like how I inexplicably went to your place, is there any other way to make you appear? For example, you giving away the gun. Is that also an attempt? You really know? Chun Mingming nodded. However, since I have obtained an unknown item, shouldn't I first find out its truth? That's right. Luochio smiled. Since the contract has been signed, the item is yours to use. Of course, how you use it is up to you. Chun Mingming looked at Luochio and suddenly asked, Do you think you will use it? Luochio asked back. Giving and using are often tied together. Customer, before giving it away, didn't you already think about it? Chun Mingming shook his head. No, I just gave him 2 options. 2 options, huh? Luochio looked at Chun Mingming and suddenly smiled. You and I are somewhat similar in the past, but not completely. Chun Mingming frowned. How about this? Luochio smiled and said, let's make a bet on whether or not you will fire this gun. What do you think? Bet? Luochio nodded and said, previously, there was a customer who made a bet with me. Of course, the bet was on something else. The result? There are winners and losers. Luochio smiled and said, of course, customer can also choose not to participate. This is just a temporary project, something I did on a whim. Maybe I will change my mind in the next moment. What are the stakes? Chun Mingming asked calmly. If you win, I will give you something of the same value as this gun for free. Luochio said indifferently, but if you lose, our contract will skip the last part. What do you think? In that case, I refuse. Chun Mingming shook his head. Luochio said, is it because the conditions are not attractive enough? If that's the case, I can give you a higher value. Double, triple, or even more. Chun Mingming still shook his head. Since there is a probability of winning or losing, there is no absolute win or loss. I don't like things that are out of my control. Besides, you can afford to lose, but I may not be able to. You are really a careful person. Luochio smiled and then stood up. If there is nothing else, please allow me to leave. Dear customer, I am very happy to have this meeting with you. Chun Mingming sighed inwardly. In this so-called meeting, he was completely on the side of being led. I am also very happy to have this meeting. Chun Mingming nodded. Before Luochio left, he suddenly asked, if this bet starts, which side will you choose? To open or not to open? Luochio said indifferently, I will choose the side you chose. Looking at Luochio gradually disappearing, Chun Mingming's eyes did not blink. After a long time, he slowly sighed and muttered to himself, completely at a disadvantage. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. The beautiful girl smiled sweetly, then turned around and walked into a dance studio. Dong Xiaofeng withdrew his hand from the window and closed the window. The two teammates sitting in the back laughed strangely. Hee, young Master Feng, I think this girl will fall in a few days. Dong Xiaofeng looked back and said indifferently, you drive, I will sit in the back. Okay. Although this was not a top luxury car, there were few students who could afford to drive such a car that cost hundreds of thousands. At least this was a car that his teammates could not afford. The two quickly got off the car and exchanged seats. When Dong Xiaofeng just sat down, the other teammate suddenly glanced at the back of the car. Young Master Feng, that seems to be your mother? Dong Xiaofeng frowned and turned around to take a look. In front of a branded clothing store not far away, a handsome and tall young man was holding a charming woman, talking and laughing as they walked out. They were so intimate that they acted as if there was no one else around. Drive. Dong Xiaofeng withdrew his gaze and said expressionlessly. Chapter 1199. Like a heat wave, it was like a loudspeaker that could move one's skin. Wave after wave, it made one's heart beat wildly. The psychedelic lights, the sounds of revelry, the wine glasses stacked into a pyramid, and the blue flames burning on the wine glasses. In addition to the two teammates, there were two other boys and several girls, swaying in front of the ring-shaped big booth. There were many bottles of wine placed on the table. Dong Xiaofeng held a bottle in his hand and drank almost all of it. He was like an outsider, looking at the crazy people in front of him. As for the people who began to kiss passionately, he just looked at them expressionlessly. At this time, a gorgeous girl wriggled to Dong Xiaofeng's side like a water snake and kissed his ear passionately. She moved all the way down, provoking him to her heart's content. Dong Xiaofeng lowered his head and looked at the lustful expression on the girl's face. It was as if he saw maggots crawling all over her face. Her face began to rot, and it was extremely ugly. But this was not real, it was just his feeling. The girl's face was delicate, and her figure was also the best among this group of girls. She was a stunner. Finally, the girl was not satisfied with this little teasing. She raised her head and held Dong Xiaofeng's face with both hands. She slowly moved closer, obviously wanting a passionate kiss. Go away. Perhaps because the music was too loud, or because the heat wave in her body almost destroyed her rationality, or maybe because of other reasons, the girl was surprised for a moment and continued her next move. Go away. In the end, She heard it clearly. Then she frowned, snorted coldly, and left because this man's eyes were really cold. After the girl left, the teammate walked over and sat down in confusion. Young Master Phone, what happened? Did she make you unhappy? You guys have fun. Dong Xiaofeng directly stood up and took a bottle of beer that he had just opened and not drunk. I've paid the bill. Young Master Phone? Young Master Phone. What the hell? They saw Dong Xiaofeng suddenly walked into the revelry young people, but in a moment his back was out of sight. Another teammate curiously asked, what happened? Who cares? It's not the first time. Let's continue. It's good to be young. If you don't have sex, you won't know your health. The silver Mercedes-Benz SLC ran all the way along the road by the river. When the roaring engine passed the bridge above, it suddenly reached its loudest sound and then came to a sudden stop. Walking to the railing by the river, the damp and cold wind made Dong Xiaofeng feel comfortable all over. His tolerance for alcohol, which had been honed by working in nightclubs for a long time, didn't make him unable to walk due to drinking too much. He just felt hot. He looked at the other side of the river. Most of the buildings were old. He remembered that when he was in elementary school, the place where he lived was right across the river. The lights on that side were the lights of thousands of homes, while the lights on this side were the cold neon lights of a luxurious life. It was hard to say which side was better. Perhaps only when both of them were looking at the opposite side would they have a trace of longing. Dong Xiaofeng heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he took out his mobile phone and tapped on the chat interface of the person called Zhao Lu. He began to type. Are you asleep? What are you trying to do? Now go outside your house and start frog hopping from downstairs. Then film it for me to see. You're crazy. I'll wait for 5 minutes. Start the countdown. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and 30 seconds. Dong Xiaofeng didn't even blink his eyes. He just stared at the screen and gradually became lost in thought. Finally, the mobile phone suddenly vibrated. The screen began to refresh one short video after another. Although the light was dim and the camera kept shaking, the person who was caught was already frog-hopping down the stairs of his house. Even a sound of breathing could be heard. Video after video, Dong Xiaofeng leaned against the railing, allowing the cold wind to blow as he drank his wine one mouthful after another. Finished. Gymnastics. What? Broadcast gymnastics. Set 15 or continue frog-hopping downstairs. Soon after, a new short video was sent. This time, he didn't even open it. He just looked up at the dark sky. How disgusting. Zhao Lu was like that, and so was he. Thinking of this, he threw the bottle out and got into the car. Before driving, he sent a message. Good night. Xiaofeng, you're back. A charming woman hurried over, her face full of concern. Why do you smell like alcohol? Where did you go crazy? Dong Xiaofeng looked at his mother and then at the man sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. His father. It's so late, what's the matter? Dong Xiaofeng casually replied. What's with your attitude? Finally, the middle-aged man who was holding the newspaper put down his hand and looked over. He was full of dignity. You don't learn good things all day. You only know how to spend money. Is my money for you to raise flowers? Forget it. The child is still young. Don't be angry. You can educate him slowly. The woman said gently. Every time I say it, you only know how to tie him up. Too kind a mother, too bad a son. Dong Xiaofeng's father snorted. From today onwards, you won't have pocket money for 3 months. Dong Xiaofeng looked at all of this expressionlessly. Ah, that's disgusting. They are. Me too. Dong Xiaofeng's mother walked to the man's side, sat down, and patted him on the shoulder. Calm down. The child is still young and doesn't know how to behave. Stop it. You only know how to help each time. It's all your fault. Don't you feel tired? Yes, it's my fault. Are you awake? Dong Xiaofeng's mother shook her head. Isn't it tiring? Dong Xiaofeng's father sighed and glared at Dong Xiaofeng. Hurry up and take a shower. You smell like alcohol. Do you look good? I know. Dong Xiaofeng didn't say anything. He nodded casually and walked to the stairs. By the way, Xiaofeng, your birthday is the day after tomorrow. I've discussed it with your father. Let's fly to Paris tomorrow night and celebrate your birthday. Dong Xiaofeng's mother said with a smile. Look, your father still cares about you. He even took 2 days off from the company. Enough. 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 Dong Xiaofeng finally stopped and turned around. That's enough. Stop acting. What did you say? Dong Xiaofeng's father immediately frowned. Dong Xiaofeng sneered. If you want to teach me a lesson, fine. But first, deal with your mistress. Mom, before you become a loving mother, please don't hang out with your boyfriend all day long. Don't you have it hard? I bet you feel disgusted when you touch each other now, right? Dong Xiaofeng didn't go back to his room and went out again. Stop. Where are you going? Dong Xiaofeng's father said angrily. Dong Xiaofeng waved his hand and didn't turn back. To squander. After the door closed, Dong Xiaofeng grabbed his teacup and threw it on the ground. Then he looked coldly at the woman sitting on the sofa. In that case, I won't go to Paris. I'll fly to Sabah in 2 days for a vacation. The woman stood up and said casually. Dong Xiaofeng's father said coldly, Up to you, but you better watch your behavior. The company is going to be listed. I don't want any bad rumors. Take care of yourself first. The woman sneered and went upstairs. When opening the door, Zhao Lu tried to be careful not to make any noise, but the light in the living room suddenly turned on. Zhao Lu was startled. He saw Zhang Xiaoqin sitting in a wheelchair at the place where the light was on. Zhao Lu, it's so late. What did you do? Why are you sweating all over? Nothing. Zhao Lu turned around and closed the door. After adjusting his emotions, he turned around and said with a smile, I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to run for a while. He quickly took a blanket from the sofa and walked to Zhang Xiaoqin's side and put it on her. Sister, didn't you fall asleep? Zhang Xiaoqin shook her head and suddenly grabbed Zhao Li's hand. Zhao Lu, I just had a dream. I woke up. Dream? Zhao Lu was stunned. Then he squatted down and grabbed Zhang Xiaoqin's hands. Her palms were a little cold. He started to rub them. What dream? I don't know. I don't even know where I am. Zhang Xiaoqin shook her head and seemed to be a little scared. Only you and me were left. Then you walked in front of me with your back facing me. You walked further and further away. I called you, but you didn't hear me. You just kept walking. I couldn't walk anymore and couldn't catch up with you. Then you disappeared and I woke up. Am I not here? Zhao Lu grabbed his sister's hand and put it on his face. How could I disappear? Do you think I can cast a spell? Don't worry, it's just a dream. Nightmares are not real. You're right. Zhao Xiaoqin smiled and pinched Zhao Li's face. Zhao Lu said, Sister, are you hungry? Let me make you something to eat. Are you trying to make me fat? I don't want to eat. Zhang Xiaoqin glared at him and complained. I'm either sitting or lying down every day. Look at the circles on my belly. Sister, you have a great figure. Zhao Lu smiled and said, Didn't I go for treatment every day? Whatever fat I have will be burned. I'm burning my calories. PFFF, I made some onion oil and some oil residue. How about making onion oil noodles? Zhao Lu winked. Zhang Xiaoqin struggled with a painful expression. She pinched Zhao Li's face with both hands and pulled. Do you really want to die? If you don't want to eat, I won't make it. Zhao Lu smiled evilly. You're courting death. Zhao Xiaoqin was so angry that she wanted to hit him. Zhao Lu quickly stood up and ran to the fridge with a smile. It'll be ready in 10 minutes. Sister, wait for me. Damn brat, put more onion oil. Zhang Xiaoqin glared at him. Seeing Zhao Lu start to get busy, she laughed and said jokingly, If I get fat and no one wants me, I won't be able to get married. Then you deserve to be my cook for the rest of my life. Zhao Lu smiled, took out the noodles, and put them into the pot. When he started to cook the noodles, it was steaming hot. They began to whisper to each other. They talked about the time when they went to catch crickets when they were young. They talked about the time when they stole watermelons from the neighbor. They talked about the time when they liked to watch Ultraman and Sailor Moon. They talked about the time when Zhang Xiaoqin grabbed the remote control of the TV and hugged it tightly. They talked about the time when Zhao Lu snatched her drumstick and made her cry. They talked about the past and the future. They were all beautiful things. The light in the living room was on, but it was only the wall lamp and the table lamp. When he opened the door, Chun Mingming noticed it, so his action was a bit gentler. A woman in a suit was lying on the sofa. The table was full of documents. The woman was holding a document in her hand, but she had fallen asleep. Chun Mingming didn't say anything. He just went to the kitchen to get some ginseng slices, soaked it in water, and brought it to the woman's side. He put it on the table and tidied up the scattered documents. Your dad came. The woman lying on the sofa didn't open her eyes. She just pinched her eyebrows and said tiredly, "Got it." Chun Mingming picked up the ashtray on the table and poured out the cigarette butt. "If your dad comes to you these 2 days, don't talk to him," the woman said at this time. Chun Mingming nodded. After putting away the ashtray, he looked at the tidy living room and took a bottle of water from the fridge. The woman asked again, "Have you packed up everything? He will leave next week and won't come back this year. Pack up carefully or it will be hard to find him. We'll talk about it later." Chun Mingming answered casually and walked to the room. The woman opened her eyes at this time and called, "Mingming, Uncle Kai is a very good person. He also has his own business in Canada. Besides cooperating with him, Mom also plans to reorganize the family with him. He is also very willing to accept you. After you go there, communicate with Uncle Kai more. Do you understand?" Chun Mingming turned around and looked at his mother, saying softly, "It's late. Go to bed early." The woman nodded and said with a smile, "You've grown up. You know what's good for yourself. Mom always believes in you. Remember to drink the ginseng tea." Chun Mingming replied and walked into the room. After closing the door, there was almost no sound. Chun Mingming sat back at his desk and glanced at his phone. There were a few short messages from Zhou Yuxing. After glancing at them casually, he put the phone back on the charger. It's still too quiet. Let's make some sound, whatever. He put on his headphones and leaned over the desk. "Include me out. Where have I seen this before? When can I feel it again?" Someone opened the door. "I'm scared to go in." Imagination erases everything. If imagination continues. I saw it in a book. In an open book. I saw it in a joke book. Chapter 1200. Curse the Haunted House. What's that? In the school's cafeteria. Of course, even the cafeteria was divided into several levels. The commoner's cafeteria on the first floor was 10 yuan, and there were even cheaper ones. Then there were the cafeterias on the second and third floors. In a private room near the window, his teammate mysteriously opened a web page in front of Dong Xiaofeng with his phone. What entered his eyes was a pixel pattern that looked like the interface of a horror game from the last century. Because of the low pixel, he could only see the outline of the website. Even so, Dong Xiaofeng still felt a chill in his heart. The four sides of the screen were dark, and in the middle was a doll with bangs wearing a Gothic-style dress. It held a knife in its hand, and on its face was a creepy and bloody smile. The background was a total lunar eclipse, emitting a dark red halo. His teammate's name was Ah Chong. Seeing Dong Xiaofeng's interest, he poked his head out. "Someone introduced this to me. They said it's very effective. The owner of the haunted house can help you curse anyone you want." The teammate beside him was stunned. His name was Ming Zhen. His surname was Ming, and his name was Zhen. He was usually called Ah Zhen out of habit. Ah Chong and Ah Zhen had always been Dong Xiaofeng's teammates in school. In fact, Ah Zhen and Ah Chong had known each other since they were young. On a starry night, they became good friends. Dong Xiaofeng casually glanced at the website of the so-called cursed house and shook his head. He looked at Ah Chong and said indifferently, "If it weren't for the fact that the school reserved some degrees for local students, and if it weren't for the fact that your boss opened a processing plant and donated a lot of money, I really don't understand how a wise and far-sighted person like you could come to school here." "Ah, no, young Master Feng. The point is whether I can do it or not. What's important is that I'm already online, okay?" Dong Xiaofeng rolled his eyes. "Go play by yourself." Shaking his head, Dong Xiaofeng got up and left his seat. Usually at this time, he would choose to take a nap in the gymnasium's lounge. He was a member of the school's basketball team. Just try it. It's not like you'll lose anything. Ah Chong ignored Dong Xiaofeng's disdain and grabbed his phone to study it. "Ah Chong, let me have a look." Ah Zhen sat down. "Ah, don't come so close. It's hot." Today, Dong Xiaofeng didn't go to the place where he usually took his afternoon nap. Instead, he went to the self-study room, next to a vending machine outside the self-study room. A beautiful girl was being hugged and kissed by Dong Xiaofeng. Admittedly, Dong Xiaofeng, who had a lot of experience, easily teased the girl to the point where she was a little delirious. especially in this kind of semi-secret and semi-public place. The stimulation that could be easily discovered made a girl's already sensitive parts even more sensitive. Unlike the passion of a girl, under Dong Xiaofeng's skillful technique, there was not a single ripple in his heart. Finally, the girl gasped for breath and separated from Dong Xiaofeng's lips. Her body seemed to have softened as she pressed herself against Dong Xiaofeng's chest. "You're so bad, deliberately picking this kind of place," the girl said coquettishly. "You don't usually come here." However, perhaps he could enjoy the peace after this kind of tenderness. After all, it was a self-study room and the surroundings were very quiet. But suddenly, a burst of singing broke the silence. The girl stuck her head out of the vending machine and looked at the self-study room a few meters away. Through the glass, she could see that in the self-study room, there was a thin boy with glasses. At this time, for some reason, he stood on the table and began to sing at the top of his voice, dancing and dancing. Is this person too stressed? The girl just felt curious. Only then did Dong Xiaofeng smile faintly. This was the first time he smiled since he started dating this girl here. It seemed that being intimate with this department belle, who was envied by others, was not as important as what was happening in the self-study room at this time. He put the phone back into his pocket and then whispered something in the girl's ear. The girl slightly lowered her head and nodded. While the man and woman in the vending machine quietly left, the boy with glasses who was shouting at the top of his voice in the self-study room suddenly jumped down, then lowered his head and went back to his seat. Under the surprised eyes of others, he casually tidied up his things, then rushed out with his school bag in his arms and lowered his head. There were no teachers in the self-study room of the university. Well, it was just an interlude, and no one cared too much about it. Maybe it was really because of the great pressure. Some people chose to study in the self-study room, while others chose to study in the library. Some chose to study in the sofa area in the library, while others chose to study in the grassland by the artificial lake outside the library. "What are you drawing?" A very distinctive voice. Tala's voice suddenly sounded behind Chun Mingming, followed by a cold feeling against Chun Mingming's neck. Chun Mingming frowned subconsciously. This girl seemed to always be able to find him unexpectedly. He didn't take the mineral water that Tala put on his neck as a prank. However, Tala sat down next to Chun Mingming and then directly took his notebook from his hand. It was a sketch drawn with a blue ballpoint pen, and it seemed to be almost finished. "You're going to be possessed by the devil." Tala only took a glance, then held her chest with pity. "You have such an excellent girl beside you. You actually drew a man." Pun intended. No pun intended. Tala stared back. Chun Mingming smiled and asked curiously, "Today, where are you going to take me to find her?" Tala pouted and thought for a moment, then suddenly narrowed her eyes, and then directly pulled Chun Mingming's body down and put him on her legs, in a dream. Not knowing why, Chun Mingming felt that he didn't resist such contact, not because of the softness of the girl's legs or the smell of her body, but because time seemed to slow down, and it was easy to feel tired, as if lying on the grassland under the blue sky and white clouds, as if he could really see the blue sky. However, a message notification suddenly broke the silence at this moment. Chun Mingming's heavy eyelids suddenly opened, and he took a look at the phone. Tala took another glance, and it seemed to be an ID with a blank avatar. At the same time, she realized that the social app on Chun Mingming's phone was really clean. After reading the message, Chun Mingming deleted it and let the interface return to blank. Tala then realized that it wasn't always so clean, but he had been keeping it clean. "Why did you delete it? Is there a secret that you can't let others know?" Tala said jokingly. "Don't tell me you have another woman, a friend." Chun Mingming said indifferently. "She wants to ask something." "Then why didn't you reply?" "No need," Chun Mingming said indifferently. "So cold." Tala shook her head, and at the same time reached out to poke Chun Mingming's cheek. However, Chun Mingming's tiredness came again, and he ignored it. Tala suddenly asked, "Have you heard of the haunted house of curses?" "What's that?" Chun Mingming's consciousness was blurred, and he gradually fell asleep. Tala looked at Chun Mingming, whose breathing had calmed down, and smiled slightly. She lowered her head, revealing a gentle gaze, and reached out to press on his forehead. An extremely pure and dry spiritual energy began to drift around. On the surface of a lake, blue waves rippled. When Chun Mingming woke up, Tala had disappeared again, just like before. However, when he opened the notebook, he saw that his sketch had been scribbled like a child's, and there was also a cartoon face with its tongue sticking out. At this time, the phone rang. "Do you have time in the afternoon? Come out and talk." It was Zhou Yuxing's call. In the station. During the lunch break, Xiao Bao was fighting in the office. Next to him was a bowl of instant noodles that he had just finished. Suddenly, "Xiao Bao!" The sudden shout gave Xiao Bao a fright. Xiao Bao's hands suddenly trembled. The priest known as the milk god Xiao Bao in the game was originally planning to cast a single target CC on his teammates, but then he made a mistake in his skill and changed it to magic antibody. As a result, his low HP teammate was instantly chopped to death by the physical monster's machete. "Lin Feng, go to hell." Xiao Bao turned around and said angrily, "I'm about to clear the first floor of the Lunar Demon King Tower. I fought for nothing." "Lunar Demon King Tower? What's that?" Lin Feng reached out and touched Xiao Bao's forehead. "You don't have a fever? Go away. What do you know? It's the new version now, and everyone is fighting to clear the tower. It's been so many days, and most of them still haven't cleared the first floor. Originally, there was hope today, but I still had to risk being discovered by the new medical examiner Nan. It's all your fault." Xiao Bao said angrily. "Don't you have two very powerful friends? Let them carry you." Lin Feng shrugged and sat casually on the table. Xiao Bao stretched and said, anyway, he had caused the death of the team's MT, and now he was being scolded, so he was too lazy to look at it. They are preparing to break through the 9th floor, so they don't have time. The 9th floor of the Demon King Tower is an area, and we can only reach the next area after destroying the 9th floor of the first zone. I don't understand. Lin Feng yawned. Xiao Bao frowned. Are you very free? Why did you come here? Lin Feng sighed. The dismembered body case is still a mystery. Director Liu lectured Sir Ma and Sir Zhou for more than an hour this morning, and then they came back and lectured us for more than an hour. It's not over yet. Oh, so you came here to take refuge. Xiao Bao poured a glass of water for Lin Feng. Yes, Master Bao, Brother Bao, please help us. Did you find anything new? Lin Feng asked expectantly. Xiao Bao said, we couldn't find any useful clues at the scene. The murder really destroyed all the traces. It's the first time I've seen such a cautious murderer. Generally speaking, there are two kinds of murderers: conscious murderers and unconscious murderers. Unconscious murderers leave a lot of traces, which is simpler. As for conscious murderers, they must have a thorough plan, so they will purposely clean up the surrounding traces after the murder. But think about it. Even if there is a conscious murderers from the beginning to the end, a period of time must have passed. No matter how careful they are, it's impossible to say that there is no trace of evidence left, unless every step is executed perfectly. But if so, the murder is really terrible. You see, dismembering a body is a very cruel thing, which shows that the murderer's mind is very twisted. But the scene is so clean, which shows that the murderer is a calm person. Come and have a look. Saying this, Xiao Bao logged out of the game with tears, and then began to check the files. These are the photos I took at the scene of Wang Liang and Wu Rong's death. Look at these photos. What do you think? One photo after another began to flash through Lin Feng's eyes. The shoe cabinet at the entrance, the living room, the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the freezer used to hide the bodies. Do you see anything? Xiao Bao looked at Lin Feng and asked. Officer Lin frowned, arms crossed, and tilted his head. After a while, he said, It seems too tidy. Yes, tidy. Xiao Bao nodded. Although no one has lived here for a long time and most of the places are dusty, everything here is very tidy. Even the stacked bowls in the cupboard are placed in the same direction. Look, this is Wang Liang's house. This is Wu Rong's house. They're all placed like this, right? That's true. Lin Feng opened his mouth. Xiao Bao said, Yes, Wang Liang and Wu Rong have different personalities, but why do their houses look so similar? You mean this is all done by the murderer? Lin Feng rubbed his brows. Isn't this misophobia too serious? OCD? I don't know about this. Xiao Bao shrugged. But it's useless to know the murderer's personality. Now, it seems that you can't even find a suspect? Sigh. Lin Feng sighed dejectedly. It seems that there's a mysterious force controlling everything in the dark. Yo, Brother Feng, so you are also a kindred spirit? It seems that I'm not alone. Lin Feng's phone suddenly rang. Okay, I know. I'll take someone to check it out right now. Xiao Bao asked curiously. What's wrong? Sir Ma's soul-chasing phone. Lin Feng shook his head. No, someone reported a suicide by hanging. I have to go and check the situation. I guess you'll be notified soon. Seeing Lin Feng walk out in a hurry, Xiao Bao clapped his hands and opened them, asking, Can I still fight the boss today? Today's harvest is good. On the street, the master and the servant walked slowly. Even now, Boss Luo's habit of going to the supermarket for discounts hadn't changed. But when they passed by an alley, Luochio and the servant girl stopped at the same time. They looked inside. In the middle of the dark alley, there was an inconspicuous billboard. The light on the billboard was only faintly lit. It said, Curse the Haunted House. Chapter 1201. The victim's name is Hai Dage. He was in the construction material business and had some assets. He had a wife and a daughter, but they were divorced. The daughter was given to the wife. The body was found around 10:30 a.m. The person who found the body was an hourly worker hired by the victim's family. The security guard in the residential area said that the victim came back at 11 o'clock p.m. last night and didn't go out after that. The surveillance video showed that no one had been here. The doors and windows were all closed. However, when Lin Feng arrived at the scene with his men, the people who had arrived earlier had already collected a lot of information. Lin Feng immediately led his men to walk around the victim's house carefully, but they didn't find any clues. The victim had been hanged. However, the forensic doctor hadn't arrived yet, so the body wasn't taken down for the time being. The police who had arrived earlier had limited tools, and they were also afraid that they would destroy useful information, so they just hung the body up. There aren't any useful clues. It seems that we can only wait for the forensic doctor to examine it carefully, Lin Feng thought to himself. Sure enough, not long after, Lin Feng heard Xiao Bao's voice coming from outside the door. However, when he turned around, the first person he saw wasn't Xiao Bao, but a cold-looking woman who was about 27 or 28 years old with short hair. The first impression Lin Feng had of this woman was that she was cold. Then, he felt that she was capable and experienced. Then, she had a good figure and an above-average face. Coupled with her unique temperament, it was actually a bonus. Even so, she still made people stay away from her. Medical Examiner Nan, the new medical examiner, was the person who had replaced Section Chief Qin. When Medical Examiner Nan arrived, Director Liu led her to greet the main people in charge of each department. He heard that she had graduated from the same school as Section Chief Qin, but was a few years behind. She was old Qin's junior sister. It was natural to greet each other when they met. Lin Feng greeted her naturally. Medical Examiner Nan nodded. After asking about the situation, she started to work directly. Xiao Bao, on the other hand, was busy with his work. Perhaps he was scolded by his new boss because he didn't come earlier? The whole process was carried out in silence. When Lin Feng focused most of his attention on the black silk stockings worn by Medical Examiner Nan, she had already finished her work temporarily. The preliminary diagnosis is suicide. Oh, suicide, yes. Suicide? Lin Feng, who finally woke up from his daydream of those beautiful legs, was startled. How do you judge? This is just a preliminary judgment, not the final result. Dr. Nan began to take off the rubber gloves on his hands. There are no signs of a struggle at the scene of death. Other than the constriction on the victim's neck, there are no obvious fatal injuries, but just when Dr. Nan was about to explain his preliminary judgment, a police officer suddenly rushed over. Officer Lin, we found it. The victim really committed suicide. Lin Feng was taken aback. As for Dr. Nan, he frowned. Clearly, he did not like to be interrupted. What did you find? Lin Feng was curious. The police officer hurriedly took out a laptop, which was placed on a coffee table. When they entered the room, the laptop screen was facing the deceased, but it had run out of battery and shut down automatically. The technician plugged it in and spent some time to crack the password before turning on. "I'm guilty." The man in the video said a lot of things in front of the camera, from how he started his business by doing bad things to what he had done over the years. At last, the man started his own action. He walked to the stool, hung the rope, and kicked the stool away. The man hung himself and then began to struggle instinctively. Soon, he stopped moving and died. And this man was the deceased. "Heidaga, I'll go back first." The new Dr. Nan said directly after the video, and then left with Xiao Bao, leaving Lin Feng and the others in a daze. "Officer Lin, what should we do next?" Lin Feng thought for a while, continue the investigation, and then write a report. "If there's nothing else, we'll close the case and issue a death certificate. Let the family come to collect the body." "Oh, okay. Yes, we didn't find it before." The servant girl looked around. Maybe it's because of the absence of the shop. That was probably the case. Luochio nodded. Although one's consciousness could radiate outwards and observe the entire place at all times and record everything, no matter how big or small, no one was interested in watching the development of everything all the time. At most, they would pay attention to some important areas and observe carefully. Except for some guests, Luochio didn't pay attention to many things. "Master, do you want to go in and have a look?" The servant girl asked softly. Luochio thought for a while and nodded since there was nothing special to do. When he walked into the alley, he seemed to pass through some invisible thin film, which seemed to be some means of vigilance and selection. There was a 5-step staircase in front of the shop. It was in a place similar to the basement. It was a very small doorway, only about 60 centimeters wide. The light pipe was on, but it was the kind of light pipe that was about to die. The white light was dim, like gray. After opening the door, they still needed to go down a few more steps. The overall space was not large, only a dozen square meters, which was at most the size of a bedroom. There were not many things in the room. There was a particularly large and exaggerated desk, an old sofa, and then a room full of cabinets, which occupied 3 walls, and a small room, which should be the bathroom. There were many books on the cabinets that occupied almost all the walls. Almost all of them were books, with only a few decorations. One of the decorations was a crystal skull, which aroused Luochio's curiosity, because Luochio remembered that he had such a crystal skull, but that was a long time ago. Now this skull was placed in the storeroom. It was one of the few things that Luochio collected in the storeroom after he became the boss. A person was lying on the sofa, covering his face with a book, so his face could not be seen clearly. But the bird cage on the large desk attracted his attention, because it was a crow that was locked up here. At this time, the crow suddenly cried, flapping its wings, making a noisy sound, and it said, "Idiot 24, get up, idiot 24, get up," like a parrot. The crow in the cage kept crying, and its voice was harsh. The person lying on the sofa grabbed the thick book that covered his face and threw it out, which hit the cage directly. The cage was also amazing. It did not fall down and seemed to be fixed on the table. The crow immediately stopped crying, folded its wings, and only stared at the cage with its eyes. "Sorry, this guy needs to be trained since childhood." On the sofa, the person lying on the sofa sat up lazily, yawning. His messy curly hair almost covered his eyes, but the visible bags under his eyes were covered with a layer of gray. He looked like a patient with deep blindness. He was young, about 25 or 26 years old. The young man stood up like a sleepy person, yawning again, and then walked to the table with his back hunched. He sat down and said, "Please sit down." Although the young man looked sloppy, the small basement was unusually clean, and everything was placed neatly. Even the thick book that the young man had just thrown out after hitting the cage automatically flew back to the wall cabinet. The servant girl pulled out the chair in front of the table for her master to sit down. At this time, the mysterious young man slightly opened his eyes, and then a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes, and then he said in surprise, "Alchemy puppet? What a delicate work. I didn't expect there to be such advanced technology here." Hearing this, the servant girl slightly frowned, but she didn't say anything because Luochio was here. Her master was also looking at this mysterious young man. At the same time, the servant girl was more and more amazed. She was very clear about what this mysterious young man was trying to pry. If it was in the past, this kind of prying would have brought great fear to this mysterious young man. Shinryu of Kelowna had tried to pry several times, and then he was sealed as a child and lived through a difficult period. Since this young man was fine, it naturally meant that her master had grown to the point where he could restrict the automatic operation of the club. However, this mysterious young man was able to see through the layer of illusion that she had put up. "Hello." Luochio greeted first. "Hello." The mysterious young man also nodded, and his sleepy appearance seemed to have woken up a little, and his sitting posture was also a little better. "You two don't have anything to do here, right?" He didn't care about the calmness of this man and the alchemy puppet. After all, they were obviously the type with power and obviously wouldn't be surprised by the abnormality here. Or in other words, they would be frightened by the supernatural power here. Luochio smiled. "We just passed by and came in to have a look out of curiosity. The House of Curses. May I ask what this place does?" The young man was very direct. "Just like the name of this house you saw. Curses, to kill people with curses. Of course, this place accepts curses from customers." "Oh." Luochio nodded. "Then, how much is the fee?" The young man smiled. "It depends on the situation and also the target of the curse. If the target of the curse is more difficult, the fee will naturally be higher. If the fee is too high, even if a name is exchanged for a life, I may not accept it. It also depends on my mood." Luochio thought for a while and asked curiously, "Is it just a curse?" The young man shrugged and said, "It can also make people unlucky, such as tripping when walking, choking when eating, suddenly falling sick, often having nightmares, suddenly withering, or directly unable to lift up when doing things, and relatively, it's very cheap." "How's the business?" Luochio asked again. The young man was stunned, but also answered, "It's just opened. It's still quiet for now, but there are already a few customers." Luochio nodded, then stood up and smiled. "Sorry to bother you. I'll visit again if I have the chance, Mr. 24. "Oh, okay." The young man nodded subconsciously. After that, Luochio walked up the stairs, and as for the servant girl, she pushed the chair back to its original place. This action naturally made the young man feel very comfortable, but the servant girl's following gaze made the young man shudder. Knowing that the two had left, the young man frowned. Damn it. How can there be such a powerful alchemy puppet in this subworld? An immortal puppet? And this man, compared to the original body, is he immortal? Supreme? He couldn't help but ponder. Now he was very weak, not even 1/10,000th of the original body, and it was just an accident that he came here. Everything was because more than 2 months ago, a space-time disorder caused a crack to appear in this subworld, and he, who was exploring in the endless space-time, released a thought out of curiosity and entered this subworld through the crack. But unexpectedly, the crack was directly fixed in a short time, which caused the connection between him and the original body to be directly cut off, and a trace of his consciousness could only stay here. The original body might not care about the disappearance of this trace of consciousness, but as a trace of consciousness trapped in this subworld, he didn't want to hide like a turtle until it was obliterated or even swallowed. Yes, it would be swallowed, because at the moment when this subworld suddenly had a space-time disorder, in addition to him, there were several different strong consciousnesses who also split their consciousnesses to explore this subworld. He was afraid that the others were like him. Because the crack was repaired too quickly, the split consciousnesses were trapped here. If they reached the level of immortality like his original body, they would naturally understand what benefits they could get if they could swallow the other party's consciousness. Moreover, without the recognition of this subworld's consciousness, he was like an unregistered resident of space-time and needed to be careful. But if he kept curling up, it was not a solution. So, he began to do his old business again, doing the business many years ago, when he was just a weak conjurer. Thinking of this, the young man rubbed his chin. Speaking of which, this subworld is really interesting. The concentration of elements here has suddenly increased, and it's still increasing. It's almost catching up with that half-demon subworld that we've explored before. At this time, The young man, 24, suddenly felt the table shake slightly. He opened the drawer under the table, took out a mobile phone, glanced at it, and smiled. Oh, there's a business. It's best to never wake up? What the hell? Such a low-level request. Forget it. Even mosquitoes have meat. Immortal life? On the way back, Luaccio stopped. This was Miss Maid's opinion. Yes, there's eternity above immortality. But it's not really eternity. At best, it can only be regarded as pseudo-eternity. Even eternity has its strong and weak. For example, the one in heaven can be regarded as the top pseudo-eternity, also known as the threshold one. Miss Maid nodded. Of course, this is just a name for the life that transcends the subworld's consciousness in some subworlds, generally popular in the subworlds dominated by magic. For example, the immortals that once appeared in this subworld where Master is now are also the same. Magic. Luaccio nodded. For the boss, the most intuitive impression of magic was a boy with glasses with lightning on his forehead in a movie. Miss Maid said again, although it's very weak, the owner of this haunted house has a trace of incongruity, so he shouldn't belong to this subworld. This is a bit strange. Generally speaking, even between the two subworlds that are relatively adjacent, there is a very difficult to break defense. Just like the transcendence, although it's possible to travel between different subworlds through the dimensional crevice, the transcendence will generally be infected with a trace of a unique aura of the dimensional crevice. It's a kind of mark of the dimensional crevice's origin. But the owner of this haunted house doesn't have it, so he should have come here through some means, and he just came here not long ago. Basically, it's very close to the truth. Yes, speculation. Luaccio nodded. He really didn't intend to waste time on this investigation, so he directly bought the information. After reading the information, the origin of the young man became clear. Chapter 1202. Each subworld must have its own administrator. For example, in this subworld, there was Area 003. Since there was a serial number, the other subworlds naturally had other numbered Area. The administration of each subworld was very responsible in cultivating its own hotbed, waiting for it to evolve to the extent that it met the requirements. In order to cultivate the most perfect subworld, different subworlds would go through many restarts and openings, trying out different evolutionary paths. For the sake of their independence, there was naturally an insurmountable barrier between different subworlds. It was just that in the entire huge system, there were subsystems in it, so it was impossible for them to be perfect without loopholes. For example, there would be creatures whose individual ability exceeded the upper limits set by the subworld, like the Transcendents or similar existences. The Transcendents could infiltrate into different subworlds through the dimensional cracks, using a special infiltration ability unique to the dimensional cracks. In addition, to let creatures that exceeded the upper limit of other subworlds infiltrate into other subworlds, they could only arrive by force, or obtain the recognition of multiple subworlds, and be able to arrive by praising their name in multiple subworlds, or they could sneak in through the dimensional cracks of the subworlds. The owner of the haunted house obviously came by way of sneaking in, and the time of sneaking in was surprisingly caused by a small episode that happened at the airport when Boss Luo took a plane back from South America. At that time, because of a special item, the special ability of the Eye of Horus Ring, it caused a temporary space-time disorder, and that was the root cause of it. Originally, number 003 Area had already begun to correct the disorder at the beginning. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to give the stowaway enough time to sneak in. It was just that Boss Luo's interest was piqued at that time, and number 003 Area's obedience was beyond his imagination. He forcibly delayed for some time, and only then did the stowaway have enough time to split a trace of consciousness and sneak in. Boss Luo easily knew the cause and effect. Well, that was all. Anyway, there were already transcendents in this subworld, so it didn't matter if there was one more or one less. However, it would appear that even after all this time, those living beings still haven't given up on exploring. As they chatted, the two of them found a quiet tea house and sat down. After ordering some snacks, the servant girl carefully smeared butter on the bread ordered by the boss and said slowly, The source of time and space is still too attractive to them. Luochio asked softly, "Have you explored it as well?" Yi knew that her master was asking about the things that happened before she became a maid in the club, so she nodded. "There was a time." Luochio nodded and immediately asked, "Are you also curious about the origin of space-time?" Miss Maid said softly, "Exploration is generally done because of his instructions, and partly because of one's own interests. But what?" Yi looked at Luochio and said softly, "I've found my destination." The two looked at each other and smiled. Their feelings were slowly growing and growing. At this time, a car stopped opposite the tea house. A middle-aged man with a tired look hurried out of the car. He then walked into a restaurant. It was Zhou Yuxing. The next moment, Chun Mingming also got out of another online car and walked in. Luochio glanced at it casually, and the topic about the subworld stopped. "Master, are you interested in Chun Mingming?" Miss Maid easily caught Luochio's attention at this time. Luochio thought for a while and said, "This person is a bit like me in the past. The club for me is like the silver pistol for Chun Mingming. He didn't choose to use it for himself, but gave it away. Don't you think such a move is more interesting?" "Master wants to use it for yourself?" Miss Maid vaguely felt something. "Let's wait and see." Luochio smiled slightly. After transforming Nero last time, there's still some source of form body left. I can't just leave so many critical gates and not use them. Zhou Yuxing added sugar cubes one after another into the coffee. It was already the fifth one. Too sweet is not good for the liver. Chun Mingming, who was sitting opposite, suddenly said. This made Zhou Yuxing, who was stirring the coffee, stop. Since they sat down, the father and son had not spoken. Hearing Chun Mingming's words, Zhou Yuxing was somewhat happy, but at the same time, the guilt in his heart became more and more intense. He knew that he really owed this child too much over the years. Especially in the past 3 or 4 years, his emotions were even more explosive. He was only willing to bury himself in work, which led to the complete breakdown of his family. At this point, Zhou Yuxing was also sad in his heart. He didn't know when Chun Mingming's character became introverted. It was probably because he often quarreled with his wife. "Waiter, give me a new cup of coffee." Zhou Yuxing pushed the coffee with 5 cubes of sugar to the side and ordered another one. "Your complexion looks better." Chun Mingming looked at Zhou Yuxing and said, "It seems to be to break the deadlock at this time." Zhou Yuxing secretly felt ashamed. He was not young anymore, but he couldn't be as calm and composed as his son. Zhou Yuxing nodded. "You also know that I have had headaches for the past few years. I haven't been able to treat it well or sleep well. But the day before yesterday, your Uncle Gao sent me some new spirit concentrating medicine. I took a few pieces and felt much better. This new medicine is quite useful, better than before." "This?" Chun Mingming lowered his head, as if thinking about something, and then said, "Teacher Gao asked for leave and hasn't come to school these few days." Zhou Yuxing said, "He said that he wants to travel for a period of time to relax and broaden his horizons. He probably won't come back in a short time. In fact, your Uncle Gao also values you very much and wants to cultivate you. With his cultivation, your development may not necessarily be worse than overseas." "All these years," Chun Mingming raised his head, looked at Zhou Yuxing, and slowly said, "You have devoted almost all your time to work. I know. I know that I was only focused on work and neglected all of you. But I will change." Zhou Yuxing directly interrupted Chun Mingming. "I feel much calmer these 2 days. When I calm down and think about it carefully, I feel like I've gone mad." Chun Mingming shook his head and interrupted Zhou Yuxing. He suddenly said, "Can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." Zhou Yuxing nodded heavily. "If I were an unpardonable criminal, would you arrest me personally?" Chun Mingming asked calmly. Zhou Yuxing immediately frowned. He could only be considered to have calmed down a little these few days, but his emotions were still easily agitated. He suddenly slammed the table, and there was a hint of anger in his voice. "What nonsense are you talking about? I can calmly discuss this question with Teacher Gao." Chun Mingming sighed and said faintly, "Can't you give me an answer? How can I be the same as Gaowen?" Zhou Yuxing said, "I am your father. I hope you can give me an answer before next Wednesday." Chun Mingming said softly. Next Wednesday, this was the exact time Zhou Yuxing knew that his ex-wife and son would go abroad. Zhou Yuxing was stunned. He suddenly felt that he had never really understood his own son. He didn't even know what his son was thinking at this moment. A trace of sadness emerged. He looked at the calm Chun Mingming and moved his lips, but he couldn't say anything. "I'll wait for your answer." Chun Mingming stood up, nodded slightly to Zhou Yuxing, and left alone under the surprised gazes of the people in the restaurant. Only Zhou Yuxing was left sitting there alone, smoking fiercely. "There's still 3 left to be investigated. I should be able to finish the investigation in the afternoon." With a trace of fatigue, Wei Zidao and Lu Mingho returned to the office in this city. Just as they entered the door, an abnormally tall figure blocked their way. Moreover, this frighteningly strong fellow was missing an arm, which made the two of them a little surprised. "Are you two Intermediate Agent Lu Mingho and Junior Agent Wei Zidao?" At the same time, a man who was much shorter and had the word spirit written all over his face jumped into the duo's line of sight. "Junior Agent Bu Bugao of the administration reporting." Lu Mingho was stunned, then nodded and introduced himself, but at the same time, he felt a little strange. Why was there a new agent here? Although there were some obstacles in this investigation, he didn't apply for backup. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a new agent here. "Comrade Bu Bugao, why are you here?" Wei Zidao asked directly. The overly spirited young agent Bu Bugao suddenly smiled and said, "It's like this. Because I participated in the Mount Tai incident and performed outstandingly, the organization specially assigned me to a new place to take up a permanent post." "And?" Lu Mingho had a big question mark. Bu Bugao quickly ran to the coffee table and came over with 2 gift boxes. "I passed by here and saw the mission information. I know that the 2 of you are temporarily on a business trip here, so I came over to say hello and get to know each other. After all, there will be opportunities to work together in the future, and I also want to get to know Senior." The overly energetic guy even had a hint of flattery in his voice. Lu Mingho looked inside and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The administration was a place that spoke based on strength. It was rare to see such a guy who spent so much effort to get along. But it was good to have someone flatter him. Besides, one wouldn't hit a smiling person. "You're too kind." Lu Mingho laughed, "but forget about the gift. The administration has rules that we can't accept gifts. You should return it." "Senior, you're really law-abiding, a role model for our generation." Bu Bugao suddenly had a look of admiration. This guy was probably born in the old officialdom, so he must be very successful, right? Lu Mingho shook his head inwardly and immediately looked at the one-armed man standing behind Bu Bugao. He frowned. "Who is he?" Bu Bugao quickly said, "Oh, he's called Wang Hu. He's a South China tiger demon. After I influenced him, I recruited him as my exclusive logistics support and took up the post with me." Lu Mingho nodded and didn't pay too much attention to Wang Hu's matter. Not to mention the logistics staff, among the official investigators, there were also investigators who served the demon race, and some were even high level. As for the logistics staff, there were also some weak demons who would be recruited. Generally, the demons who served as logistics staff were generally weaker, or their abilities were more suitable for support, or they were oppressed by other powerful demons and sought protection from the administration. This Wang Hu had a broken arm, so he was probably the type who was seeking protection from his enemies, right? After all, with the administration's reputation, the demon race would more or less have scruples. But to be subdued by Bu Bugao, even though he was a tiger, his strength must be limited, right? After all, no matter how Lu Mingho looked at it, this Bu Bugao was a rookie. At this time, Bu Bugao gently nudged Wang Hu with his elbow, and the dull Wang Hu seemed to have remembered something. Wang Hu greets the 2 sirs. "Sirs," Lu Mingho shook his head, and his evaluation of Bu Bugao suddenly dropped a lot. So he waved his hand and said, "Okay, it's enough that you've met. There's no need to be so polite. There are many demons who serve in the administration. As long as you know your place, we won't make things difficult for you." Bu Bugao nudged Wang Hu with his elbow again, and Wang Hu slowly said, "You're right, sir." Lu Mingho, who didn't know that this might be the peak of his life, said impatiently, "That's it, we've met. I still have something to do, so I won't talk about it. Help yourselves." After saying that, Lu Mingho took Wei Zidao directly into an office that was temporarily vacated. Bu Gao blinked, holding 2 boxes of gifts, and suddenly frowned. It shouldn't be. Didn't they say that paying respects and giving gifts can make the superiors happy, and that if you're a little sweeter, you'll be appreciated? Are they the type who eat porridge every meal without fail? The puzzled Bu Gao stared at Wang Hu, and then said angrily, "It must be because of your dumb look." "Me?" Wang Hu pointed at himself. "What does it have to do with me?" "Soul," Bu Gao said seriously. "Your performance lacks soul and has no emotions. Listen, when you speak, you have to inject your soul into it, so that people can feel your sincerity." "Oh," Bu Gao sighed. After spending some time together, he was already used to Wang Hu, this blockhead. He didn't expect anything. At this time, Wang Hu looked out the window, pointed in the direction of an industrial park, and suddenly said, "There's a strong demon aura over there." Bu Gao didn't care, and said casually, "This is the private land of the Shinryu in Kelowna. There's nothing strange about encountering demons just by walking around the streets." Wang Hu said, "I feel that the owner of this demon aura can fight with me for a while." Bu Gao immediately rolled his eyes. This guy said that he didn't like to fight, but on the way here, this guy would kick every demon he met and almost trample them to death with just a few kicks. He even said that it was a friendly match. "Don't mess around." Bu Gao lowered his voice and said, "If other cities fight, then so be it. At most, we'll just leave. This is Lord Long's territory. Didn't you see that the administration doesn't even dare to station people here? Even if something happens, at most, they'll just transfer people from other places for a casual visit." "Oh." At this time, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao came out of the office again and put on their coats. It looked like they were planning to go out again. Bu Gao felt that his performance just now wasn't good enough. He couldn't show that he was a promising newcomer, so he went up to them on the spot. "Seniors, are you going out?" "You haven't left yet." Lu Mingho frowned and said casually, "We still have a case. We really don't have time to greet you. Please forgive us." "Senior," Bu Gao said enthusiastically, "I just saw you frowning when you came back. You must have encountered some problems. How about this? Anyway, I still have a lot of time to take office, and I have nothing to do now. Why don't you let me help? Gain experience and learn." "You?" Wei Zidao opened his mouth. Bu Gao nodded immediately, eager to try. He pulled Wang Hu, pointed, and said, "Us." Lu Mingho pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, you follow us for the time being." Chapter 1203. Fatty. Zhao Lu, who was wiping the sweat off Zhang Xiaoqin's face, was stunned and stopped. The siblings had spent a lot of time communicating during this period of time, so naturally, they talked about a lot of things. After the accident, Zhang Xiaoqin had always been silent, but now, as if she had been reborn, she became much more cheerful. "Yeah, brother, don't you remember?" Zhang Xiaoqin flicked Zhao Li's forehead. "Didn't you often go to Fatty's house to play PS2? I have some impression, but I don't remember." Zhao Li shook his head and asked curiously, "Why did you suddenly mention him?" "I'll beat you with 8 gods. Bullsh *T. I haven't used Terry yet. Look at me, Wu Bai Sure, 4-style divine dust. Take my heaven and earth brilliant tyrannical fist. 38 combo. You lost. Let's do it again." While speaking, Zhao Lu vaguely remembered a round face. He was almost 13 or 14 years old. At that time, the siblings' parents were not divorced yet. They were still living on the streets of the lower town. There was a chubby kid in the neighbor's house. He was easily bullied because he liked to cry. Zhang Xiaoqin smiled and said, "Nothing. I seem to have seen Fatty's mother today. She changed a lot, and I almost couldn't recognize her. Maybe I got the wrong person." Here, Zhao Lu was stunned. He remembered his sister said that she met an old colleague and gave him 500 yuan. It was strange to meet people she knew in such a rehabilitation center. "She probably came to see a doctor?" Zhang Xiaoqin said casually. She entered a doctor's room and didn't come out for a while. I was thinking about whether to say hello, but I thought better of it. Zhao Li nodded. Zhang Xiaoqin was a person with strong self-esteem. If she was sympathized with because of her current state, she would feel bad. At the same time, she didn't want to trouble others. After taking care of Zhang Xiaoqin, Zhao Li left in a hurry. There was only one class in the afternoon, and it was the second half of the class. Tomorrow was Zhang Xiaoqin's birthday, so he planned to go to mall to get her birthday gift before class. Of course, before that, he would go home and put down his lunchbox and other things. After leaving the treatment room, Zhao Li hurried to the entrance of the center. That's settled then. I'll pick you up at the airport tonight. A woman's voice rang in Zhao Li's ears. He subconsciously turned his head to take a look. In an office next to him, there was a woman with a smile on her face, walking out like a spring breeze. She seemed to have taken good care of herself. Perhaps she looked a few years younger than her actual age. Through the crack in the door, she could see a young and handsome doctor sitting inside. Although he was called a doctor, he was actually just a physical therapist. Zhao Li, who had some guesses about the relationship between the two, did not pay too much attention to it. Looking at this woman's face, he vaguely had an impression of her. Thinking of his sister's words, he thought that this could be little Fatty's mother. If that was the case, then she was really much younger than she actually looked. Is she really little Fatty's mother? Zhao Li was stunned, then shook his head. He didn't think too much about it, and quickly left. He still had to rush home. After the woman closed the door, she glanced at the young man who passed by and frowned. This child, I seem to have seen him somewhere. After returning home, he washed his things. When he was about to go out, his phone received a message. After Zhao Li glanced at it, his face changed slightly. Zhao Li sat on his sofa for a while, then suddenly gritted his teeth and ran into the room. He took down the box on the wardrobe, then took out the things inside and stuffed them into his school bag. A silver pistol? Bu Gao stopped in his tracks. This was just the beginning. They hadn't found one of the remaining 3 targets yet. Before this, Bu Gao had already learned about what had happened from Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao. Bu Gao's identity could be verified, and his ID was real. The equipment he carried from the administration also had a serial number. Lu Mingho did not intend to hide anything from his colleagues in the administration. Originally, the exchange of information between the agents was not a big deal. With Bu Gao's authority, he could also know this. Of course, some confidential things would not be revealed. Now, several of them were waiting for the target to appear. But Wang Hu was also here. Wang Hu's giant-like body and the appearance of a broken arm were very eye-catching. Looking at this man, whose muscles were like steel, it was hard for passers-by to imagine what kind of accident would cause him to lose an arm. Although Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao were also curious, they did not deliberately inquire about Wang Hu's privacy. They just casually asked about Wang Hu's origin. Regarding Wang Hu's origin, Bu Gao had already made sufficient preparations. In fact, he didn't know where Wang Hu came from. He only knew that this big guy had forgotten the past and didn't know how his arm was broken. But Wang Hu's explosive strength also made Bu Gao feel like he had picked up a treasure. This guy was dull and easy to talk to. Although he didn't know when he would suddenly wake up, if he let such a big fool wander outside and join some bad group, it would cause more trouble. Of course, Bu Gao had some selfish motives. After all, with such a strong big fool, it would be much more convenient for him to deal with things when he took office in a place in the future. As a weakling who had just made his debut, when facing some old demons in the deep mountains, with Wang Hu by his side, he was naturally confident. Therefore, after almost selling his body and accompanying some old leftover woman in the archives of the headquarters for a few days, Bu Gao finally figured out the problem of Wang Hu's identity. Of course, because of the Mount Tai incident, many people died, and now the headquarters was in a mess. They had no time to care about a small logistics support personnel's information. Coincidentally, Wang Hu had an extra identity file in the administration. Wang Hu race, South China Tiger, became a demon 60 years ago, nascent stage, gentle personality, loyal and honest at this time. When Lu Mingho asked, he naturally answered smoothly without any problems. As for Wang Hu, he had been strongly requested by Bu Gao not to release his demon aura casually. Needless to say, after his request, this big fool really restrained his demon aura. Once he restrained it, he actually didn't release any demon aura at all. Bubugao couldn't help but be amazed. Although this big fool was stupid, his ability was really good. Maybe it's some kind of magical artifact with special ability. Lu Mingho said simply, killing a rapist is not a big deal. But the second case is simply a downtown killing. It's too blatant. No matter what's behind it, this person's identity still needs to be investigated. Bugao nodded solemnly, but in his heart, he was already very happy. He didn't expect that before he officially took office in the local area, he would encounter a problem that even a mid-level agent would find difficult. If he could help in this matter, wouldn't the organization's evaluation of him in the future rise? Therefore, the person who aspired to become the section chief of the administration broke out with unprecedented enthusiasm at this time. Senior, this target looks like he hasn't come out for a long time. How about this? I'll think of a way to lure him out. Bubugao hurriedly volunteered. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao looked at each other, then smiled and nodded, happy to enjoy the results. After seeing Bubugao take Wang Hu into an office building, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao began to chat. Brother Hao, if there are no clues for the last three people, we're going to walk into a dead end again, Wei Zidao said worriedly. Yes. Lu Mingho nodded. We've already captured the aura of the people who went to the alley before. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any omissions. And Xian Er's confession has already proved that such a person exists, unless this person also has the ability to erase his own aura. Wei Zidao had a different opinion. He suddenly said, Brother Hao, actually I still have some reservations about that kid that day. You mean the young man protected by the witch of Hai Dongqing? Lu Mingho frowned. Wei Zidao nodded. Yes, you see, when we just put him down and were about to interrogate him, this witch of Hai Dongqing suddenly appeared like a guardian. Don't you think it's still a bit strange? Lu Mingho pondered and said, It's indeed a bit. It's too much of a coincidence to say it's a coincidence. It's just that the identity of the witch of Hai Dongqing is too sensitive. We can't make direct contact. As he spoke, Lu Mingho directly looked at the Bagua mirror in his hand. There were only 4 light spots left on it. 3 of them had not been investigated yet. As for the 4th one, which was Chun Mingming's light spot, because they didn't really interrogate him at that time, Lu Mingho subconsciously didn't erase it and kept it. The location was clear. Brother Hao, if the remaining 3 people have no problems, why don't we try to figure out this guy who was protected by the witch of Hai Dongqing? Wei Zidao suggested in a low voice. After thinking about it again and again, Lu Mingho nodded and agreed. At the same time, he diverted some of his attention to look at the door of the office. To be able to achieve such a level of skill, of course, he had to train himself by slacking off at work for a long time. Xiao Bao couldn't help but admire his own strength. When he really reached the position of Master Bao in the bureau, he probably wouldn't have to worry about life and death like this anymore. The moment these words appeared on the interface, Xiao Bao immediately switched the interface back to the office mode. At the same time, a woman with a beautiful figure and a cold expression slowly walked in. Section Chief Nan. Xiao Bao hurriedly stood up and greeted her. Nan Xiaonan looked at Xiao Bao and frowned. Then she nodded and said indifferently, Prepare some things for me. I'm going to prepare for the autopsy. Is it the deceased Hai Dagui from this morning? Xiao Bao asked subconsciously. Nan Xiaonan shook her head and said, It's the deceased Chong Xiao and the suspect who died before. Xiao Bao was stunned. They? But Section Chief Nan this. Didn't Bureau Chief Lu say that their case has been taken over by someone else? And I've done a check before, but I didn't find anything special, except that I don't know how the bullet disappeared. I've got the approval. You can go and prepare. Nan Xiaonan raised the document in her hand and then turned around and walked out after finishing her words. Regarding the case of Chong Xiao and the suspect, Bureau Chief Lu didn't want anyone to ask about it. Even Sir Ma came back with a face full of dust and was depressed for a long time. Forensic Nin had just been here for 2 days, and she had already gotten the approval. So awesome. Xiao Bao couldn't help but admire her. Although this new female forensic doctor looked cold and unapproachable, her work attitude was very admirable. She had only been here for 2 days, but she had already completed a lot of work. The bodies of the deceased Wang Liang and Wu Rong. Wu Rong's body was sent back, and Hai Dagui's body in the morning. If Chang Xiao and the suspect's bodies were added, it would be 5 times. 5 times in 2 days. Nan Xiaonan put on her gloves and looked at the tools that Xiao Bao was preparing. At the same time, her eyes fell on the 2 bodies side by side on the operating table. Her pupils contracted slightly. She thought to herself, Wu Rong and Wang Liang's bodies. Although the way of killing seems to be cruel, it's clean and neat. There shouldn't be much blood spilled when the bodies were dismembered. The murderer should be very familiar with the structure of the human body. The incisions are also very smooth. The murderer doesn't seem to be killing for revenge. In addition, the murder scene is highly tidy. Hai Dagui didn't have any external injuries. He did hang himself, but I can feel a residual aura in his body, and it's extremely evil. It seems to be the interference and control of consciousness. Next are the bodies of Chang Xiao and the suspect. The bullet disappeared due to physical strength, and the murder scene doesn't have the conditions to open fire. Chang Xiao and the suspect's deaths, as well as Hai Dagui's, are related? While she was thinking to herself, Section Chief Nan. Section Chief Nan. Are you ready? Section Chief Nan? Got it, let's eat. Nan Xiaonan nodded. Let's start with the suspect first. Eat? Start? Xiao Bao was stunned, and then he shook his head. He must have misheard. As she spoke, Nan Xiaonan walked to the suspect's body. There were several stitches on the body. Obviously, Xiao Bao had checked them before. Nan Xiaonan didn't look at the wounds that had been cut open. Instead, she directly held up the head of the deceased, bent down, and stared at the wound on the forehead that had been cleaned, a small bullet hole. At this moment, Nan Xiaonan's eyes suddenly shrank. What's going on? Hai Dagui has extraordinary power, but it's only the power of evil. It's similar to curses or black magic. But why is there a trace of the power of the law left in this wound? She suddenly put down the suspect's head and turned to look at Chang Zhao's head. She did the same thing, touching the head with both hands. Then, her lips, which were hidden under the mask, opened slightly. Her expression was solemn. It's still the law. In the afternoon, the sky was gloomy, as if it was going to rain. Although it was the beginning of spring, the weather was still a little cold. The weather in the south was very humid. Now, when the cold wind blew, it was even colder. Chapter 1204. In the autopsy room, Xiao Bao blinked and looked curiously at Nan Xiaonan's autopsy work. Generally speaking, along with the autopsy process, the results of the autopsy should be mentioned so that it was convenient to record. However, Nan Xiaonan didn't say a single word. This caused Xiao Bao, who was like a pen and paper, to not be able to write even a single word. It's done. Nan Xiaonan suddenly stopped. You can put the body back. Xiao Bao was stunned. It's done? He did not record anything. Nan Xiaonan took off her gloves and mask, and after inadvertently wiping her lips with the back of her hand, she walked out of the autopsy room without saying a word. Nan Xiaonan, who ignored Xiao Bao, who was in a mess in the cold air, walked to the office alone. She actually had other thoughts in her mind. Absorbing the remaining energy on Hai Dagui's body allowed me to recover about 0.003 units of power. It's useless. But if I can absorb the remaining power of the laws on Wang Liang and Wu Rong, it's just that with my current ability, I can't absorb it at all. Soon, the remaining laws will dissipate. What a pity. So, there really is an eternal sovereign in this subworld who understands the power of the laws. At that time, I was fighting with a few enemies in the rift. Unfortunately, I had to draw out the power of the origin to resist the erosion of the origin of the dimensional rift, causing this subworld to suddenly become damaged. I only took a quick look at the rift and only felt that there were several powerful auras in this subworld. Later, when I checked, my consciousness fell again. It was the same for my enemies. At this time, the suppression of the worlds while on transcendence is terrifying. It is probably not easy for my consciousness to recover to the level of my original body. The world's barrier has been repaired, and my original body is naturally unwilling to pay a huge price to descend. It should directly give up and focus more on dealing with the enemies in the rift. I'm afraid that the consciousnesses of my enemies who have fallen here have also suffered the same fate, so I'm not afraid. What I am afraid of is something else. At that time, I was fighting with a few enemies, and it seems that two-dimensional voyagers of unknown strength had also passed by. They probably released their consciousness to check this place and fell here like me. Right now, he's probably worrying about how to break through the restraints of the subworld, right? Nan Xiaonan had already returned to her office. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat down. She quickly adapted to the development of this world civilization. After all, in her previous world, although magic had completely replaced science, there were still some people who couldn't use magic and insisted on walking the path of science. Although they hadn't developed to the level of modern civilization, they had already developed the so-called difference engine. I've fought with those enemies for countless years, and I know them very well. Even if we all fall here at the same time, the situation on both sides is still at the same level, so there's nothing to be afraid of. However, if these enemies were to find the two undying beings and join forces to deal with me, the situation would be dangerous. I have to find these two unexpected wills as soon as possible and see if there's a possibility of them joining forces. Also, the natives of this subworld seem to have quite a few experts. Perhaps I can make use of them. Nan Xiaonan slowly blew on the coffee, waiting for the temperature to be right before she drank it. As for the warmth from holding the cup with both hands, Nan Xiaonan showed an expression of enjoyment. Even so, she could not help feeling a little gloomy. Had she ever been so weak? The subworld's rejection of foreign wills is too frightening. I can only choose to fuse with the soul of the natives of this subworld to be allowed to exist, while my consciousness would definitely be obliterated, but that way, the soul of the natives would affect me. Fortunately, it's not much. Nan Xiaonan, this identity would make it easier for me to move around in society. Still, the atmosphere in this city is chaotic and there are many transcendents. Although there are differences in strength, the powerful one could directly threaten my true form, but it suddenly left a few days ago for some reason. Now, I have to be careful of the other darkness. Yes, darkness. That day, the entire hemisphere was shrouded in a terrible darkness. Even her true form, which had walked the path of immortality for countless years, could only tremble in the instant of that darkness, let alone her current weak self. This was also the reason why she didn't dare to make too many big movements. Lying low was the only thing she could do right now, because she didn't know if the great existence behind the darkness had already noticed her arrival or not. Therefore, she did not dare to wantonly use secret techniques to recover her strength. Otherwise, there were many individuals known as monsters in this city, which were very suitable for her to recover her strength. She had to be careful. When she went to check the corpse in the morning, she felt a trace of power left in Hai Dagawe's body and was naturally a little excited to hunt. She could not help but laugh bitterly. It's said that subworlds with higher numbers are more dangerous. So it's true. Nan Xiaonan weakly rubbed between her eyebrows and took a sip of coffee. Her tongue was instantly scalded. It's so hot. Before the class started, Zhao Lu walked into the classroom with a heavy heart. This was not a public class, so all the students were in the same class. Naturally, he did not meet Dong Xiaofeng and the others, but he still habitually sat near Chun Mingming, just in the row in front of Chun Mingming. There were not many students in the class, and some students directly did not come, probably because the teacher would not take attendance in this class. So even though the class had officially started, the classroom was still relatively empty. The dull teaching began, and many students were sleepy. Zhao seemed to be a little absent-minded. He lowered his head and put his hands under the desk. The expression in his eyes kept changing. Suddenly, Zhao Lu felt that his shoulder was patted. This sudden pat made Zhao Li's reaction abnormally big, as if he was startled. He abruptly turned around. The person sitting behind him was naturally Chun Mingming. Zhao Lu seemed to be relieved. What? Chun Mingming was expressionless. He just glanced at Zhao Lu and then looked at the ground, saying indifferently, "You dropped something." It was just a ballpoint pen that fell on the ground. Zhao Lu quickly picked it up. "Thank you. Are you okay?" Chun Mingming asked casually. Zhao Lu quickly shook his head, but the mobile phone in the drawer suddenly rang. Zhao Lu gritted his teeth and grabbed his school bag. I have something to do. Help me ask for leave." After saying that, Zhao Lu carried his school bag and hurriedly walked out of the classroom from the back door. Chun Mingming frowned and seemed to be lost in thought. "What's the matter with that student? Does anyone know?" The teacher on the podium obviously noticed this scene and immediately asked with displeasure. He could tolerate the low attendance rate, but he directly left in the middle of the class. This was intolerable. At this time, Chun Mingming slowly stood up. "I'll go and have a look." The teacher frowned, but Chun Mingming directly walked out of the classroom without waiting for his permission. This was intolerable. The teacher slammed the podium and was about to reprimand these lazy students when suddenly there was a plop. At this time, in the front row of the classroom, a girl unexpectedly fell down without warning and directly fell to the ground. The students around her suddenly screamed, and the silent classroom suddenly became chaotic. All I did was hit the podium, and he fainted from fright? Looking at the girl who was being helped up and didn't wake up, the teacher looked at his palm in a daze. But he didn't know that at this time, a crow that had stopped at an unknown time opened its wings and slowly flew away. Finally, the crow flew to the rooftop of the teaching building and finally landed on the shoulder of a young man with a haggard face, slightly bowed, and messy hair. At this time, the young man seemed to be sneering. "Just because of a disagreement, you can let your good friend sleep forever. It seems that no matter which world you are in, once a woman holds a grudge, it is very scary. So, idiot 24, you haven't found a girlfriend until now?" The crow suddenly spoke human language. The young man scratched his hair and didn't get angry when he heard this. After yawning, he said in boredom, "Why didn't I bring anything and only brought a beast like you here?" Shaking his head, the young man casually grabbed the crow from his shoulder. "I can't earn much from this commission. Let's settle the other commission. Speaking of which, it's really convenient. Things like mobile phones can increase the number of customers all of a sudden. And there's also a person here." With that, the young man threw out the crow in his hand. The moment the crow was thrown out, its body turned into a black shadow. Its body expanded several times, and then its hands directly grabbed the young man's shoulder. With a flap of its wings, the giant crow flew out with the young man's body. Unexpectedly, just as it flew out of the rooftop guardrail, the shadow crow's body shook for a while and instantly returned to its original size. "Oh no, I forgot that my power hasn't recovered. Hatchy, 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 hatchy." The phone's voice was very loud. It seemed to be a line used by a character in a certain game. Dong Xiaofeng was expressionless. He lowered his head and played the game on his phone. He didn't have to go to class, because no matter what the results were, when he needed to graduate, he would naturally graduate. Because it was a Friday afternoon, there were many families visiting Huxin Park in the middle of the city, which was formed by several high schools. Suddenly, a football fell from the sky and hit Dong Xiaofeng's hands. "Brother, I'm sorry." A man in his early 30s ran over at this time. At the same time, he looked at the mobile phone that was knocked to the ground by the football. His heart could not help but thump. He recognized this phone. The lowest specs cost at least 7,000 to 8,000 yuan. He couldn't help but look at the young man in front of him, and a bad feeling grew stronger. With a height of 1.8 meters and a strong physique, the man felt like he was a skinny monkey in comparison. In addition, this young man's eyes gave people a feeling of hostility, as if they were filled with anger all the time. "Dad." Behind the man, the boy who was only a few years old seemed to be a little scared. At this time, he hid behind his father and grabbed his father's pants. "Little brother, I didn't do it on purpose. Look, if this phone is broken, can I take it to repair it?" The man braced himself and said. He saw Dong Xiaofeng suddenly bend down, but instead of picking up the mobile phone, he picked up the football. He came in front of the father and son, squatted down, and handed the football in his hand to the child. His eyes were still a little scary. The little boy was startled and a little scared, but he still took the football. "Little brother?" The man was a little uncertain about this scary young man and called out hesitantly. Only then did Dong Xiaofeng pick up the phone. After casually glancing at it, he turned back and said indifferently, "Go and accompany your son. It's okay." Thank you." The man took his child and thanked him, then quickly left. Dong Xiaofeng watched the father and son walk away. Then he lay on the lawn expressionlessly and continued to play his game. At this time, someone trotted towards him. Young Master Feng. Young Master Feng. So you are here. I thought you ran to the lounge of the stadium again." The person who came was one of Dong Xiaofeng's teammates, Ah Zhen. "What's the matter?" Dong Xiaofeng simply stopped playing the game, sat down, and asked casually, "Where's Ah Chong? Why is he not with you?" "I don't know." Ah Zhen shrugged and said, "He has been acting strangely since he came today. Just now, he secretly ran to the new teaching building. I don't know what he wants to do." New teaching building? Dong Xiaofeng frowned. That building had not been built yet and was still under construction, but Dong Xiaofeng did not care too much. "Young Master Feng, it's a little boring. Why don't you play with that coward?" Ah Zhen suggested at this time. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly said, "These 2 days, you have had a lot of fun, right?" "It's okay," Ah Zhen said with a smile of exultation. "Every time I see this coward's look of being angry, but not daring to speak, it's so cool. I was wondering if I should play something more exciting." "Young Master Feng, you are right. It's really interesting to keep those photos and videos and play slowly. Give me your phone," Dong Xiaofeng suddenly said. "Okay." "Young Master Feng, what are you doing?" Ah Zhen could not help but be stunned. He saw that Dong Xiaofeng's gaze was as cold as the December wind, causing him to shiver involuntarily. Just like that, he broke his phone and threw it directly into the lake in front of him. "Young Master Phone, my phone? You are not allowed to touch it in the future," Dong Xiaofeng said coldly. "Scram." "Young Master Phone, what did I do wrong?" I said, "Scram." "Do you want me to stand up and say it?" "Don't." Mingjin hurriedly got up. He was extremely displeased, but he did not dare to show it. He could only leave dejectedly. After that, Dong Xiaofeng lay down again. After a while, he raised his phone and opened the social media app. "Don't go to class. Come to the school gate. I'll take you somewhere." After a while, "What are you trying to do?" "One wants me to go to the new teaching building. The other wants me to go to the school gate." "Enough. I won't obey you anymore. You should all receive punishment." New teaching building? Chapter 1205. Chun Mingming walked in the corridor unhurriedly. The class was on the 7th floor of the teaching building. He saw Zhao Lu walking towards the elevator. He looked down and saw Zhao Lu walking out of the teaching building. When he came to the elevator door, he saw a woman unexpectedly. "You are..." Chun Mingming couldn't help but stare at the blonde woman with blue eyes. She was like a perfect work of art. She was from that place, the servant of the man who sold him the pistol. "Mr. Chun, are you free? My master wants to have talk with you." At this time, Chun Mingming looked at the servant girl in front of him with surprise. Last time, he tried to see if he could see the boss. But this time, the boss took the initiative to find him. This made Chun Mingming a little confused. The servant girl smiled and seemed to be waiting for Chun Mingming's response. Chun Mingming had to nod. Obviously, he couldn't resist the mysterious power, even if he wanted to. "Where is he? Please follow me." The servant girl waved her hand, and the elevator door behind her opened automatically. Chun Mingming walked in directly with a calm face. The servant girl walked into the elevator and praised. "Mr. Chun is really a calm person." Chun Mingming said indifferently, "Maybe I'm just a little slow, or I'm not good at expressing my emotions." The servant girl chuckled. "Even your heartbeat is very calm." Chun Mingming didn't say anything. The elevator soon stopped running. When the door opened, Chun Mingming didn't see the first floor of the teaching building, but the lobby of the shop he went to before. Chun Mingming liked the atmosphere in this shop very much. It was as if he had found a quiet place in a busy city. Of course, in terms of quietness, it was naturally not as quiet as the Gushi in the old building deep in the mountains. However, it did not have the mood of quietness in the midst of activity. This was the impression this shop gave him. He couldn't help but yearn for it. "What's the matter?" Chen Mingming sat down and frowned, which was rare for him. Luo Qiu put down the black teacup in his hand and said with a smile, "Do you remember the bet I mentioned last time?" Chen Mingming nodded. At this moment, Boss Luo waved his hand. Beside the two of them, a light screen that was as tall as a person rose up. The light screen gradually changed, and finally, a 4K image quality scene appeared. "This is Zhao Lu." Chen Mingming frowned. Through this miraculous light screen, he was able to see Zhao Li's every move. "A bet," Boss Luo said softly. "Mr. Chen's friend should be the one with the highest chance of shooting. This is a rare opportunity. Mr. Chen, are you sure you don't want to play a game with me?" Chen Mingming was silent for a while before he slowly said, "I said, I'm not betting. If Mr. Chen wins, I'll give you 50 years of life. What do you think?" Luoqiu looked at Chen Mingming and smiled. "I think Mr. Chen needs it." Chen Mingming sighed and said seriously, "I'm too far away from you. I can't think of anything that you want from me. You're the one who started the bet, and you said you'll only choose the other side. That is to say, no matter which side I choose, you'll win. The condition seems attractive, but it's just a trap. You can give me my life in the blink of an eye, and if I lose, the contract will end." Boss Luo didn't say anything, but the servant girl said indifferently, "Mr. Chen, with my master's identity, of course, he won't interfere with the uncertainty of such a small bet." Chen Mingming lowered his head and didn't say anything. Luoqiu said, "In this case, let's wait for the result. What do you think, Mr. Chen?" Chen Mingming nodded and then looked at the light screen. This guy was called Xiang Chong, who was usually called a Chong. He was always following Dong Xiaofeng. Zhao Lu looked at this guy silently. On the way to class, he received a message from Xiang Chong, so he had to run out in a hurry. Finally, he met Xiang Chong at the agreed place, but this guy didn't say anything and took him all the way to the newly built teaching building and walked in. At this time, Zhao Lu received another message from Dong Xiaofeng, asking him to wait for him at the school gate. This made Zhao Lu almost collapse, knowing that these guys threatened him with those dirty things and didn't intend to let him go at all. "Where are you taking me?" Zhao Lu stopped and roared at Xiang Chong, who was walking in front of him. Xiang Chong slowly turned around at this moment, and his expression seemed strange. He didn't look at Zhao Lu, but looked around the construction site and suddenly said, "Do you know why no one is working here today?" Zhao Lu was agitated and said angrily, "How would I know? The boss in charge of this project is dead." Xiang Chong said indifferently, "He committed suicide. The contractor died, so the workers naturally stopped working, so no one came here." Zhao Lu frowned. "What does this have to do with me?" "It doesn't matter." Xiang Chong shook his head, "But it has to do with me. Do you know? This project originally belonged to my family, but that damn guy used despicable means to rob it. My family was waiting for this project to save our lives, but in the end, Zhao Lu was stunned. Unexpectedly, Xiang Chong's expression changed several times at this time, and finally seemed to make up his mind. He suddenly rushed forward and kicked Zhao Lu on the stomach. Zhao Lu was not a person good at sports, and his physique was far less than Xiang Chong's. He fell to the ground in pain. He didn't have time to react, and his body on the ground was directly pressed by Xiang Chong. After that, Xiang Chong's fist hit his face again and again. Dong Xiaofeng had also hit him once, but he had always hit his shoulder or back. He had almost never hit those places that were really painful or obvious. Zhao Lu didn't understand why Xiang Chong went crazy at this time, and had to instinctively protect his face. "You're crazy," Zhao Lu said painfully, but Xiang Chong suddenly stopped waving his fist. Zhao Lu looked at Xiang Chong's face through his legs, and suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Xiang Chong's face was ferocious at this time, like a devil. Not only that, Xiang Chong's hand was holding a strange dagger, which seemed to have some strange patterns. Zhao Lu didn't have time to look at it carefully, but he knew that Xiang Chong was obviously going to stab him with the dagger at this time. Zhao Li's face suddenly changed dramatically. In panic, his survival instinct made him burst out far more than his usual strength, and he twisted his body. The dagger suddenly missed, but also directly pierced Zhao Li's shoulder. Zhao Lu was in pain, struggled to resist, and finally kicked Xiang Chong away. After breaking free, Zhao Lu scrambled to his feet and grabbed his bloody shoulder. "You're crazy." After being pushed away, Xiang Chong not only didn't wake up, but also became more serious, like a crazy man, a life for a life. "I just tried it. I didn't expect it to be true." "Zhao Lu, you coward, die for me." At this time, Xiang Chong was holding the dagger and crazily rushing at him. But at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from behind Zhao Lu. The figure stretched out his hand and hit Xiang Chong's chest. Like a railing, Xiang Chong crashed into the arm and was directly knocked to the ground. Zhao Li's eyes widened in disbelief. Dong Xiaofeng." At this time, Dong Xiaofeng was slightly panting at this time, and his forehead was full of fine sweat, as if he had rushed all the way here. Dong Xiaofeng turned back at this time and fiercely looked at Zhao Lu. This beast-like gaze subconsciously made Zhao Lu feel cold all over. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng stepped on Xiang Chong's wrist, which was holding the dagger, and said angrily, "Are you King crazy?" Young Master Feng. Being glared at by Dong Xiaofeng's fierce eyes, Xiang Chong seemed to be awake for a moment and suddenly panicked. "Young Master Feng, don't block me. I don't want to die. If I don't kill him, I will die." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Dong Xiaofeng snorted. "You idiot. Are you taking drugs to your brain again? I told you not to take drugs, but you didn't listen. You don't understand. You don't understand." Xiang Chong crazily said at this time, "You don't understand. If you don't let me kill him, I will kill you. It's the same as killing you." "You." In a hurry, Xiang Chong's left hand suddenly grabbed the dagger in his right hand and fiercely slashed at Dong Xiaofeng. Dong Xiaofeng's motor nerves were very developed, and at this time, his foot that was stepping on Xiang Chong's right hand suddenly pulled back. A cold light flashed, and a wound of more than 10 centimeters long was cut on Dong Xiaofeng's calf. This pain made Dong Xiaofeng instantly break out in a cold sweat and suddenly knelt on the ground. This time his heel was cut. At this time, Xiang Chong stabbed at him again, and Dong Xiaofeng was quick-witted. He grabbed a handful of cement dust from the ground and suddenly sprinkled it. Xiang Chong's eyes were suddenly cut by the cement dust, and he screamed in pain. He crazily waved the dagger in his hand, which was very scary. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng endured the pain and reluctantly stood up, only to feel a sharp pain coming from the cut on his heel. However, he was a person who did not admit defeat. At this time, he clenched his teeth and suddenly rushed at Xiang Chong, pushing him to the ground, and pressed down on Xiang Chong's body. However, Xiang Chong was completely crazy, and even with the strength that Dong Xiaofeng usually trained, he was still somewhat unable to suppress Xiang Chong. He raised his head and looked at the pale Zhao Lu, who was also covering the wound on his shoulder, and roared in a low voice, "What are you doing? Come and help." Although he did not know what happened to Xiang Chong, Zhao Lu could not help but hesitate at this time. He looked at Dong Xiaofeng, who was almost using all his strength to suppress Xiang Chong, and also looked at Xiang Chong, who was crazily struggling, and his eyes slightly shrank. Xiang Chong suddenly went crazy, although he did not know the reason, but he went crazy. He held a dagger in his hand and had already cut Dong Xiaofeng's body. Thinking of the things that he held in Dong Xiaofeng's hand, Zhao Li's breathing suddenly became rapid. Perhaps he did not need to use the silver pistol at all. "Come here, bastard." Zhao Li took a deep breath at this time, shook his head, and stepped back 2 steps, saying indifferently, "You two dogs fight each other. What does it have to do with me?" Dong Xiaofeng's pupils suddenly shrank. Zhao Lu at this time turned around and staggered away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. At this time, Xiang Chong had directly bitten his arm. He had actually bitten off a piece of his flesh. This pain directly surpassed the wound on his leg, and Dong Xiaofeng almost fainted. His hands subconsciously loosened, and Xiang Chong stabbed his abdomen. Dong Xiaofeng saw stars and cold sweat. At this time, Xiang Chong directly sat on his body. Dong Xiaofeng saw the madness and bloodthirst in Xiang Chong's eyes, and watched the dagger fiercely stabbing at his heart. He could not help but reveal a trace of despair. At this time, bang! A brick fiercely hit Xiang Chong's face, and Xiang Chong seemed to have directly knocked out. Xiang Chong directly fell on Dong Xiaofeng's body. Looking at the dagger inserted next to his cheek, Dong Xiaofeng's heart beat wildly. Only then did he see Zhao Lu with a ferocious face and a brick in his hand. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng pushed Xiang Chong away forcefully. Seeing that Xiang Chong's chest was undulating, he wanted to get up. Although the wound on his heel was painful and bleeding, the stab wound on his abdomen was more serious. Of course, he wanted to save himself. Unexpectedly, Zhao Lu suddenly rushed at him and pressed Dong Xiaofeng to the ground again. Zhao Lu suddenly grabbed Dong Xiaofeng's neck, and his eyes were still ferocious. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng calmed down. The pain made him twitch more or less, but at this time, he still spoke calmly. "Didn't you leave me to die? Why did you come back? Do you want to kill me with your own hands?" "Dong Xiaofeng, you King beast. You want revenge?" "Sure." Dong Xiaofeng's face was pale, but he chuckled. "According to the amount of blood loss, even if you don't help me, I won't be able to hold on for long. I suggest that you better leave here and get rid of the relationship as much as possible. Don't you want revenge? Then don't get yourself involved. You think I don't dare?" Dong Xiaofeng didn't speak, but closed his eyes because of the dizziness caused by excessive blood loss. But the hands on his neck slowly loosened. Dong Xiaofeng subconsciously opened his eyes, but he saw that Zhao Lu was pressing the wound on his abdomen with both hands. You don't want to kill me?" Zhao Lu said coldly. "Do you really think I will do such a self-destructive thing? Even if I have 10 million reasons to kill you, even if I really want to kill you all, even if I have prepared everything, I won't do in the end. I still have a family to take care of. I can't let my sister, who has just recovered, fall into a miserable life just for revenge." "Family?" Dong Xiaofeng's heart trembled. "Listen." Zhao Lu stared fiercely at Dong Xiaofeng. While picking up his phone to call for help, he said coldly, "If you still have a little conscience, if you still know how to be grateful, then don't trouble me in the future. I'm not saving you. I'm just saving myself. I promise you," Dong Xiaofeng said faintly. Then his pupils suddenly shrank, and his face changed dramatically. He suddenly reached out with one hand to push Zhao Lu away. At the same time, a dagger missed Zhao Li's body and fiercely stabbed into Dong Xiaofeng's chest. Xiang Chong, who should have been lying on the ground, was now emitting a black gas. Chapter 1206. The sudden change caught Zhao Lu off guard. However, Xiang Chong's current appearance made Zhao Lu suck in a cold breath. Looking at the black gas coming out of Xiang Chong's body, his melting face, and that strange smile, Zhao Lu was so scared that his whole body became weak. At this moment, the dagger pierced Dong Xiaofeng's chest. He saw that Dong Xiaofeng had completely fainted, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Zhao Lu grabbed his school bag in horror and put his hand into the school bag. But at this time, Xiang Chong's hands let go of the dagger, stood up, and muttered to himself, "I don't have to die, I don't have to die. Someone replaced me. Someone replaced me." At this time, he fell to the ground in pain, grabbed his face that was beginning to rot, and made a sound, which gradually changed from a human voice to an ear-piercing, beast-like sound. "Save me, save me." Xiang Chong painfully stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to grab something. "I have already done it." Why? Because the time has passed. Suddenly, a long voice sounded. At the construction site, a man who seemed to be unable to straighten his back, with a pale and haggard face and a crow on his shoulder, slowly walked over. Although his appearance was strange, this man seemed to have a few leaves on his body. Zhao Lu looked at the strange man in bewilderment and subconsciously moved back. At this time, the crow suddenly flew out from the mysterious man's shoulder and then stopped on Xiang Chong's body and directly pecked on Xiang Chong's forehead. The crow seemed to have taken out something and then directly swallowed it, and then slowly flew back to the mysterious man's side. After that, The man looked at Dong Xiaofeng, who still had a dagger in his chest, bent down, and directly pulled out the dagger, and seemed to be a little regretful. This is difficult. Why didn't you complete the replacement before the time was up? This vitality is much stronger. It's a pity that you didn't succeed. Who are you? Zhao Le said in horror. Facing such a strange thing, he really couldn't keep calm. Oh, sorry, I scared you. At this time, the young man scratched his head, walked a few steps forward, looked at Zhao Lu, and said, I am 24, a death curse master. If there's anyone you don't like, you can look for me. It's cheap and good, and you don't have to worry about it. But it's best to remember to pay the bill after you're done. Don't forget the time like this customer. Otherwise, you've seen the consequences. You don't come over. Zhao Lu retreated even more fearfully. The young man shook his head and ignored Zhao Lu. Instead, he walked to Xiang Chong's side. At this time, Xiang Chong's originally rotten body was strangely carbonized. He was still holding out his hand to ask for help. His eyes were bulging out of their sockets, and his death was abnormally horrifying. At this moment, the young man muttered to himself, Now that we're poor, let's not waste it. Why don't we make them ghost servants? As if he wanted to do something, the young man crouched down and pointed his finger at Xiang Chong's chest. Immediately, with Xiang Chong's corpse as the center, a 3-meter-wide blood-red ring emerged from the floor. The center of the ring seemed to be stained with flowing blood as it gradually filled up. One after another, ancient and strange symbols floated and then began to climb up Xiang Chong's body. However, right at this moment, a fireball suddenly shot over from the front. The young man didn't move, but the crow on his shoulder suddenly flew out and turned into a shadow, directly blocking the fireball. After that, the shadow turned back into a crow and fell on the young man's shoulder again. The young man frowned and stood up, only to see that there were 4 men in front of him. 3 of them were wearing black suits, and one of them had a broken arm. At the same time, they were the ones who gave the young man the most terrifying feeling. These were the members of the Administrative Bureau's team. Tell us your identity and cooperate with our work. You violated the extraordinary prohibition regulations. One of them opened his ID card at this time, and at the same time held up a special revolver that could shoot Taoist bullets, and shouted coldly. Bu Bugao nervously looked at Wei Zidao, who was holding a Taoist gun at this time, and secretly wiped his sweat. In fact, except for that time on Mount Tai, this was his second real mission, and he faced a criminal directly. Originally, he volunteered to investigate, but in the end, he investigated 3 guys in a row and found nothing. In the end, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao discussed and felt that they should investigate Chun Mingming again, since they didn't really investigate him before, and directly rushed to the University of Political Science and Law. Originally, they should have stayed in the school. The bright spot on the 8 trigrams mirror had been shining. Unexpectedly, when they arrived, the bright spot suddenly disappeared. The last place where it disappeared was this school. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao naturally felt that things were strange, so they started to search this school. They didn't expect to encounter a disgusting, extraordinary crime during this search. At the moment when they arrived, they only saw this mysterious young man, in a strange way, seemed to be doing something. Next to him, there was a young man lying in a pool of blood. A young man was terrified, and there was a horrible corpse lying on the ground. How could he remain calm? Wei Zidao directly shot a bullet at him. Facing the menacing temporary group of 4 from the administration, the young man scratched his head awkwardly. Extraordinary prohibition regulations. What is this? Wei Zidao snorted coldly. Give up resistance. Go back with us and tell us the truth. The young man frowned and said, You guys, I don't have any grudges with you, right? I just came to settle the bill. This one lying on the ground has nothing to do with me. As for this corpse, it's because I wanted to go back on my words and was punished. Lu Mingho frowned, thinking that this guy didn't seem to know anything about the administration. He tilted his head and looked at Wei Zidao, saying quickly, Take him under control first. Understood. Wei Zidao nodded, then put away the documents and directly rushed to the young man with a gun. Looking at Wei Zidao rushing over, the young man calmly jumped back a few steps and at the same time The crow on his shoulder flew out again, turning into a dark shadow, directly blocking in front of Wei Zidao. This dark shadow was also strange. It could stretch, shrink, and even turn into a fist, changing its posture freely, and its power wasn't weak. It could easily punch a huge fist mark on the ground. Taking advantage of this gap, Lu Mingho quickly rushed to the front of Dong Xiaofeng and began to check Dong Xiaofeng's injuries. Zhao Lu gritted his teeth, but still braced himself and ran up. He felt that these men in black could take him down. He looked at Lu Mingho's hands pressing a few times on Dong Xiaofeng's body, and then looked at Dong Xiaofeng's unconscious and painful appearance. His heart trembled, thinking that this guy pushed Xiang Chong away to save him. He couldn't help but have some complicated feelings. How is he? Zhao Lu asked carefully. He won't die. Lu Mingho didn't look up, but opened his suitcase with a hiss, took out bottles and jars from it, and applied some ointment to Dong Xiaofeng's wound. The wound that was bleeding magically stopped at this time. Zhao Lu was amazed, but Lu Mingho raised his head and shouted at this time, "Bu Bu Gao, come and protect him." Hearing this, Bu Bu Gao immediately stepped forward, recalling the school's handling of this situation with a smile on his face. "Don't worry, brother. Your friend is fine. You'll be fine too. I will protect you." Zhao Lu nodded subconsciously. At this time, Wei Zidao was caught in a bitter battle with the shadow, constantly dodging, and it was difficult to get close to the mysterious young man. He couldn't help but shout, "The opponent is stronger," requesting permission to use intermediate Taoist bullets. Use approved. After getting Lu Mingho's authorization, Wei Zidao's face suddenly lit up with joy. He looked at the constantly changing shadows and sneered. He quickly removed the remaining 3 bullets in the revolver and then directly replaced it with a new bullet. He raised his hand and fired. The power between the primary bullet and the intermediate bullet was very different. Both of them had the power of intermediate Taoist magic arts and above sealed. Of course, this was not comparable to the powerful high-level Taoist magic arts bullets consumed by the administration on the top of Mount Tai that day. That level of bullets would not be casually given to agents to use in the city, unless there was a particularly dangerous situation. But after that, it was necessary to write a report for an internal investigation. At this time, a bullet was directly shot at the shadow, and, at the same time, the place where the shadow was shot exploded instantly. The shadow directly exploded, creating a huge gap. Wei Zidao shot 2 more times in succession. The power of the second explosion directly shattered the shadow, and finally fell to the ground like a rag. But these shadows quickly gathered again, and turned back into crows, and staggered back to the young man's side. "Surrender." Wei Zidao pointed the gun at the young man. "Give up resistance." The young man was not in a hurry, and looked at the pistol in Wei Zidao's hand curiously. "Hey, I didn't expect to develop such an interesting prop here. The principle seems to be different from mine." "Cut the crap. I'll say it again. Give up resistance." Wei Zidao shouted loudly. The young man shook his head and suddenly reached out his hand. His hand suddenly disappeared, as if it had reached into another space. The young man slowly pulled his hand out of this strange space. After that, the young man held a silver shotgun that looked like an ancient short-fire system. He smiled and said, "I also have this thing, but I don't know if it's more powerful than yours." He was also interested in this prop, and thought that since he came to this subworld, he did not have a good contact with the transcendence in this world, and it was difficult to estimate the development of the transcendence in this world, so he planned to have a good test today. Silver gun. But at this time, Bu Bu Gao suddenly pointed at the young man. "Senior, silver gun. Is this the murderer you are looking for? It's really silver." Wei Zidao's eyes suddenly shrank at this time. Hearing Wei Zidao's exclamation, Zhao Lu was startled and remembered that he also had a silver gun in his school bag, and then his breathing became rapid. But it seemed that they did not notice him. Lu Mingho also frowned and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, are you the real murderer of these recent murders?" The young man could not help but be stunned, but he remembered that during this period of time, he did accept the commission of customers and cursed 1 or 2 humans to death, so he shrugged and said, I'm just doing it for money. It's really you. Wei Zidao snorted and pulled the trigger again, and a bullet was shot out. The young man's bent waist suddenly straightened, and he dodged the attack with a strange speed, and at the same time, he quickly shot out 3 black light balls with a silver shotgun in his hand. These light balls were strange. Although their speed was fast, it was far slower than the speed of bullets, but they rushed to Wei Zidao's side in an instant. Wei Zidao was shocked, but he let these 3 black light balls attach to his body, and then the light balls split open, and black shadow vines instantly entangled him firmly. Wei Zidao suddenly fell to the ground and lost the ability to live. Then the young man attacked again with the silver shotgun, 10 shots in a row. These 10 spears were different from the black balls of light from before. What shot out was actually a black wind. This black wind was like the face of a malicious spirit. As it rushed forward, it let out an ear-piercing shriek, which was incomparably strange. Seeing this, Lu Mingho quickly waved the metal rod and hit one of the black winds, but it did not disperse at once. At the same time, Bu Bugao hurriedly began to take out his equipment. His equipment was obviously complete, but between using the metal rod and the Taoist pistol, he suddenly fell into a dilemma. But the black wind had already rushed in front of him, and Bu Bugao suddenly screamed. Suddenly, a huge figure blocked in front of him and waved its hand to slap away the black wind directly. Wang Hu, Bu Bugao shouted happily. He had chosen to bring this blockhead along with him. He was so King witty. And Wang Hu nodded woodenly. Bu Bugao saw the opportunity to make a contribution at this time and quickly said, "Go and help Senior Lu and the others." Okay. Wang Hu nodded again, then stepped out, and his figure disappeared instantly. At the same time, the black winds disappeared one by one, and Wang Hu's speed was like teleportation to Bu Bugao. Finally, Wang Hu came to Wei Zidao's side and directly tore off the black tentacles wrapped around Wei Zidao's body. So strong. Lu Mingho was stunned at this moment. On the side, the young man obviously also noticed Wang Hu. Looking at the brawny man with a broken arm who easily broke his curse, he could not help but be amazed. "Wang Hu, kick him!" Bu Bugao shouted excitedly at this time. "I allow you to step on people. Just don't step on them to death." "Okay." Wang Hu nodded. When the young man heard this, he was stunned, then sneered, and reached out again to take out the same silver shotgun from the strange space. At this moment, he held the silver shotgun in both hands, but there was a crazy aura of disdain for the world. Unexpectedly, before the shotgun could shoot out the curse, the young man felt a terrifying force imprinted on his chest. The brawny man with a broken arm in front of him was actually faster and directly flashed in front of him and kicked out without saying anything. There was no time to dodge. Bang! The young man's body flew out in an instant and directly hit the wall. He felt that a few of his ribs were broken. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said sadly, "What's the situation?" Chapter 12:07. The young man's body soon fell from the wall, and he spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. He couldn't remember the last time he spat out blood, but he vaguely remembered that in a time and space long ago, there seemed to be a pretty girl who played a joke on him. He got used to it after spitting it out. "I'm really not used to it." The young man took a deep breath, but his broken ribs seemed to have pierced into his lungs, and this action instantly caused his whole body to almost spasm in pain. Wang Hu walked directly in front of the young man, and his huge shadow was enough to directly cover the young man. "You're too weak." The young man moved his lips. The last time this sentence appeared in his mind was almost as long as the time when he spat out blood. "I didn't expect there to be a warrior with such a good physique." The young man coughed out another mouthful of blood, but the eyes hidden under his bangs suddenly emitted a ray of cold light. At the same time, a dark shadow quickly rushed towards Wang Hu from the side. At this time, Wang Hu still had a dull look on his face, but his arms swung out without warning and directly scattered the dark shadow. Looking at Wang Hu, who was in a daze at this moment, but his casual moves were so accurate and domineering. The 2 completely different feelings seemed to be misplaced, but they existed at the same time. The corner of a young man's eyes couldn't help but twitch. Where did this monster come from? While Wang Hu displayed his invincible power and directly kicked the mysterious young man to the point that he couldn't fight back, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao naturally didn't stay idle. Although they had doubts about Wang Hu's combat strength, at this time, the first thing to do was to directly control this mysterious young man. The two quickly took out the tools developed by the administration to catch transcendence and directly rushed over. Unexpectedly, the young man suddenly bit his palm, and blood immediately gushed out. The moment his blood fell to the ground, it merged into the floor. In an instant, the floor suddenly seemed to melt and actually began to churn, turning into a waterbed, making it difficult to maintain balance. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao instantly lost their balance and fell to the ground. Wang Hu, on the other hand, was towering and unmoving like a mountain, but subconsciously frowned. He subconsciously clenched his fist, but suddenly released it, and the huge demonic power had hibernated before it could burst out of his body, and just stepped out. With his stomp, the entire new teaching building under construction instantly shook violently. The layers of lime were shaken off crazily, but they didn't damage the foundation of the building. At the same time, they broke through the strange phenomenon in the surroundings. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao fell to the ground. They thought that they had fallen into a swamp, but when they woke up, they realized that they were only sitting on the ground. However, the mysterious young man had already disappeared. Bu Gao rushed forward, grabbed Wang Hu's arm, and asked, "Where's the prisoner?" Wang Hu looked confused. Then he shook his head. Not to mention the current Wang Hu, even if he was in his normal state, he would still be puzzled. This was because the methods used by this young man were very strange. It was as different as heaven and earth from the Kelowna Taoist sect. Seeing that Wang Hu did not know how the criminal disappeared, Bu Gao could not help but feel a little disappointed. At this time, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao's expressions were not very good. After all, that young man looked like he was seriously injured, but they still let him escape in the end. Fortunately, the appearance of this mysterious young man had been secretly recorded, and the next step was to issue the warrant. Of course, before that, they needed to know more about this mysterious young man. Dong Xiaofeng was unconscious, and only Zhao Lu was left at the scene. Everyone couldn't help but look at Zhao Lu. I'm not very sure either. This person said that his name is 24. Zhao Lu was very nervous. Even if the man who claimed to be Lu Mingho had already treated his injuries, he was still frightened by the scene of the agency agents fighting with the mysterious young man. Vaguely, Zhao Lu heard from a few words that they were tracking down the mysterious man with the silver pistol. Zhao Lu was somewhat aware that the silver pistol that these people from the agency were really tracking was the one that he hid in his bag. It was just that the mysterious 24 was innocently implicated. But at this time, how could Zhao Lu confess the truth to Lu Mingho and the others? He subconsciously wanted to keep this matter to himself so that Lu Mingho and the others would not notice anything. Therefore, he was very cooperative with the other party's inquiry. He immediately told the reason why he came to this place, but omitted the matter of being threatened. Bu Gao was holding a small notebook, recording what Zhao Lu said, and asked more about Zhao Li's background in detail. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao listened on the side and did not stop Bu Gao's investigation. Anyway, these things are what they had to do. Bu Gao volunteered himself, which was naturally what they wanted. According to Zhao Li's description, this guy who claimed to be 24 seemed to have accepted Xiang Chan's commission to kill a boss who contracted the entire building project. Wei Zidao began to analyze. Lu Mingho was also thinking, but he thought more than Wei Zidao. For example, Wang Hu's matter. It was just that he intended to train Wei Zidao, a junior, at this time, so he did not interrupt. Xiang Chang probably wanted to go back on his word after the event, or, to protect himself, he intended to kill either Zhao Lu or Dong Xiaofeng to replace himself. Wei Zidao said solemnly at this time, "Although Dong Xiaofeng's wound has been treated, there is still a strange energy left in his body. Maybe we can use this strange energy to track 24's whereabouts." Wei Zidao looked at Lu Mingho and said, "In addition, Zhao Lu is also an insider of this matter. May 24th, not necessarily not look for him. If that's the case, Brother Hao, I think we shouldn't let Zhao Lu take the fragment withdrawal for now." Lu Mingho nodded, "Indeed, but it's not good to stay here for a long time. Let's take Zhao Lu and Dong Xiaofeng back first." Wei Zidao nodded, turned, and walked to Bu Bugao's side. Therefore, in a situation where Zhao Lu was extremely uneasy, he had to leave with this group of people. The light curtain that was comparable to 4K picture quality was frozen at this time. Not to mention Chun Mingming's appearance at this time. Our boss Luo had a strange expression on his face. This expression appeared after seeing the mysterious young man, 24, took out the silver short rifle. Even Luochio couldn't help but sigh when encountering such a coincidence. It seemed that there was really such a profession that would inexplicably become a scapegoat. Chun Mingming finally retracted his gaze at this time and slowly sighed. Looking at Luochio, he was a person who was used to thinking, but he couldn't figure out the intention of this mysterious boss. Did he invite him here just to watch this scene? Wait, why did he regard it as a performance instead of what really happened? Chun Mingming couldn't help but fall into contemplation. Luochio didn't disturb Chun Mingming's silence at this time. He was quite patient, so he sat quietly at this time. He knew that Chun Mingming would speak first, because Chun Mingming had more questions in his heart. Finally, Chun Mingming slowly sighed, raised his head, and said indifferently, "It didn't shoot. It is unlikely that he will use this gun in the future." Luochio smiled slightly. "This actually depends on your wish, whether he will use it or not, and also depends on the extent of the person who gave it to him." Chun Mingming frowned. Luochio said slowly, "First of all, when you gave the gun to Zhao Lu, you didn't explain too much about this gun, you only explained how to use it. Think about it. How can a person who has always been a modern scientific person believe in the ability of this gun at the first moment?" His first feeling towards this gun was not surprise, but fear. "What do you think he is afraid of?" Chun Mingming muttered, "He is afraid of guns." Luochio nodded. "That's right, a law-abiding person will naturally feel fear when facing a weapon that is banned by society. However, it was clear that he was more concerned about the identity of the person who had delivered the gun to him. What he is afraid of is the intention behind it." Chun Mingming nodded. He had also considered this point, so Zhao Lu had not used this gun, which was also within his expectations. Luochio smiled. "If you want to let others use this gun, first of all, you need to make them believe that this is a magical spearhead. Of course, your actions are not wrong. The characteristics of this gun are destined to have perfect concealment even if it kills people. The concealment of the gun is perfect, but the person who uses it is not perfect. If you're only willing to stay behind the scenes, you naturally can't come out to make contact with others, which will inevitably reduce the credibility. But if you show up, or even talk to the other party face to face, and gain the other party's trust, you will definitely appear in this relationship." Chun Mingming shook his head. "I am not you. I don't have your ability to appear and disappear unpredictably. In fact, the key is in the information." Luochio smiled. "The use of information can allow you to freely manipulate even if you don't appear in this relationship, even if you are just an ordinary person." Information? Chun Mingming was startled. He suddenly had a strange feeling. He felt that such a conversation was like a kind of teaching. Information about people. Luochio nodded. "Let's assume that the ability of this gun has been exposed, but you haven't. For example, there have been more than a few people who have died because of this gun. When people know this information, the credibility of this gun will naturally be higher when it appears again." Chun Mingming nodded. He was a smart person. With just a little explanation, he was able to understand the method. Indeed, if there were a few more victims and the circumstances of the victims' deaths were known to the world, or even a step further and let the world know of the existence of such a gun, when he gave it out again, perhaps the person holding the gun would be able to accept it very quickly. They might even be unable to resist experimenting. Naturally, they would know the ability of the gun through experimentation. The key was information. Chun Mingming subconsciously looked at the light screen beside him. At this time, he still felt that it was unreal. Just like this, he sat in this quiet place and easily knew what was happening outside. He believed that this method was the real concealment, without any trace like God's vision. Be good observation. Luaccio smiled slightly at this time and waved his hand, not just observe a certain person, but everyone, every aspect, every moment, even everyone. Along with Boss Luo's voice, pieces of light screens began to appear in front of Chun Mingming. They were like countless lenses, like windows that kept popping up in a computer, and on each window, something was happening. Distant, near, public, secret, from top to bottom, from bottom to top, sad, happy, angry, happy, between people, no matter how big or small the matter was. At this moment, an unprecedented sense of impact made it difficult for Chun Mingming to maintain his usual calmness. He seemed to have turned into a pair of eyes that were everywhere, overlooking all living beings. Just like a few minutes ago, he and Luaccio were watching everything that happened in the teaching building together. From Xiangchang's madness to the appearance of 24, then the agency's reckless advance, followed by the confrontation between the two sides. Their dialogue, their behavior, and everything about them were all in a panoramic view. In fact, there were no secrets anymore. In fact, they were facing the truth all the time. This was a wonderful feeling. A feeling of being able to control everything was vaguely fascinating. After a long time, Chun Mingming woke up from this mysterious feeling. He slowly exhaled, looked straight at Luaccio, and said in a deep voice, "What is your purpose?" Luaccio smiled and said, "Mr. Chun, have you ever thought of working under me?" Chun Mingming was shocked and was silent for a while. "Why me?" Luaccio said indifferently, "Because fate has guided you to me." Chun Mingming was stunned and frowned. This reason made him feel a little unreal, even Chinibu. "I'm kidding." Luaccio smiled slightly. "You shouldn't mind. As for the reason, I think if possible, I hope you can find it yourself. The premise is that I join you. The premise is that you join us. Just to accept your invitation? Of course, you also need to meet the requirements." "What requirements?" Luaccio waved his hand, and 2 sheepskin scrolls appeared in his hand. He put the sheepskin scrolls on the table and chuckled. "Just treat it as an assessment. This is the background information and test questions for the assessment." Chun Mingming subconsciously took them. Luaccio said indifferently, "Don't be in a hurry to open them. I won't force you. These 2 scrolls will be kept for 12 hours. You have 12 hours to think about it. When the time is up and you don't open them, they will naturally disappear and you will forget what happened today. But once you open them within the time limit, you must complete it within 5 days. Otherwise, you will lose your qualification and forget this matter at the same time. The choice is yours." 5 days. Chun Mingming nodded. It was only 5 days since he left the country. Chapter 1208. As time went by, Zhao Lu was secretly anxious. He sat in a room outside, silently looking at his mobile phone. There was no signal. He was brought into this building not long ago, and it was in the middle of the downtown area. How could there be no signal? Zhao Lu couldn't help but think of today's encounter with those guys with power. His brain couldn't help but be in a mess. He felt that he, an ordinary person, was inexplicably involved in an unknown event. Zhao Lu also thought of the scene where Dong Xiaofeng saved him in the end. He still felt that it was incredible. He subconsciously looked at the room in front of him. Dong Xiaofeng was brought in at this time for further treatment. He didn't know the situation. "Oh, so you are here. Come with me, young man." A spirited young man walked in front of Zhao Lu with a smile on his face and said loudly, "Bubu Gao, there is no way to solve it for the time being?" In the room, Dong Xiaofeng had already woken up earlier. His body was wrapped in a thick layer of bandages, and his heel had also been bandaged. According to the man named Lu Mingho, the injury on his heel would not affect his original athletic ability after it was healed. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng was not too concerned about the injury on his body. Instead, he was thinking about another thing. He didn't know what happened after Xiang Chong stabbed his chest with the dagger, but he remembered the scene when Xiang Chong stabbed him with the dagger, or rather, Xiang Chong's appearance at that time. Obviously, it was not the appearance of a human. Wei Zidao on the side cleared his throat at this time. Student Dong Xiaofeng, I am sorry about your injury. With the conditions of our office, we really can't get rid of the residual strange power in your body. At present, we can only stop the residual power. Well, you can think of it as a means of sealing. Dong Xiaofeng's ability to accept things was very strong, at least after seeing Xiang Chong's abnormal and terrifying appearance. Of course, a part of the video recording of the battle with the mysterious Youth 24 that Lu Mingho showed him was enough to prove this point. But the most important thing was his own fatal injury. His heel, abdomen, and even his chest were pierced by the dagger, but he was able to get out of bed in just a few hours. Although his body was still very weak, normal medical treatment was probably impossible. Then, will this affect me in the future? Dong Xiaofeng frowned. Lu Mingho hesitated for a moment and finally told the truth. We can't give you a correct answer, because the remnant energy in your body is a little strange. Even if it is temporarily sealed, we cannot be sure how it will affect you if it stays in your body. In addition, we cannot be sure how long the seal will last. After all, this kind of seal is only a temporary measure that we can use to deal with it. My companions and I aren't the type that specializes in sealing and healing. In other words, there are people who specialize in sealing or healing, right? Where is it? Dong Xiaofeng frowned and said calmly, You claim that you exist to protect the people. You can't just leave a victim like me to die, right? Of course. Lu Mingho nodded. At the same time, he was rather surprised by this young college student. After all, not only was he able to accept the situation, he was also abnormally calm. After the incident, he didn't panic, or perhaps he did panic, but his heart was strong enough. Then, invite him here. Dong Xiaofeng nodded. At the same time, his expression relaxed slightly. Wei Zidao couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I'm afraid it's not possible now. This student, our stronghold in this city, is a bit special. Generally, we won't send people here. Then what should I do? Dong Xiaofeng didn't make a fuss, but asked calmly. Although he was still a student, because of his family, he had seen a lot of situations in the workplace and officialdom since he was a child. Especially the shirking of responsibility, it was even more common. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao didn't have a cold attitude, which made him feel that the so-called administration was really people-oriented. You can rest assured about this. Lu Mingho smiled slightly. Although it's not possible here, we can send you to a place with conditions for treatment. We have better conditions in the provincial government. I believe that you can completely recover. However, we can't guarantee how long it will take. You may need to leave here for a while, so you'd better discuss it with your family. No need. Dong Xiaofeng said indifferently. It's decided. I can go to the place you mentioned at any time. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao looked at each other. They didn't expect Dong Xiaofeng to agree so quickly. Lu Mingho nodded. Well, we'll arrange someone to send you there. It just so happened that Bugao came here. He could do this job. Thank you. Dong Xiaofeng slowly exhaled, and then said, When I go there, if someone asks me about this, I'll say that you saved me. Lu Mingho looked at Dong Xiaofeng in surprise. He was not afraid that Dong Xiaofeng would make a fuss. After all, every mission was recorded when necessary, especially when there was a battle, and Dong Xiaofeng's record was before they arrived. It was reasonable to say that there would be no problem. However, if Dong Xiaofeng went to the provincial government and insisted that he and Wei Zidao treated him carelessly and didn't pay attention, which led to the failure to get rid of the mutant power in the end, it would be a little troublesome. The investigation in the Bureau naturally wouldn't believe the words of an ordinary person. However, if he made a fuss, it would inevitably spread. Most of the agents in the Bureau were carefully selected. They were not tempted by things like money, but they were very protective of their reputation. After all, among the agents in the Bureau, apart from their own strength, the only thing they could compare with was their reputation. However, during the initial period of the Bureau's construction, because of the loopholes in the management, and because of the mixed relationship between the disciples of the Taoist sect and the Demon Clan, there were often mishandled things. Many people had been treated badly. Later, the management was improved day by day, and the people-oriented principle was more emphasized. Every agent had a strict record. For drugs like fragment withdrawal, there were also strict standards for the use. After a long time, the Bureau's style of work became more decent. Especially after the Mount Tai incident, all the staff learned the core spirit of try not to provoke the conflict between the people and the Bureau, and between the transcendence and the Bureau. If it was before, Lu Mingho would have more ways to deal with it. However, now was the time when the wind was blowing, so he naturally had to be more careful. We're just doing our job. Lu Mingho smiled at this time, and his attitude was naturally much gentler. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly asked, Xiang Chong is dead? How will you deal with this matter? Lu Mingho said casually, we naturally have a way to deal with it. You don't have to worry about this, student. We'll do our best to let you return to your daily life. We won't let your future life be affected by this matter. What about Zhao Le? Dong Xiaofeng raised his head. I mean the one you brought back with you. Him, what? What is this? Looking at the small capsule and a glass of water that Bu Gao gave him, Zhao Le couldn't help but feel a little scared. Fragment, the name of this medicine. Bu Gao sat down casually, crossed his legs, and said, after you eat it, you'll forget what happened in the past few hours. Basically, if there's no special situation in the future, you won't remember it either. Zhao Lu hesitated and asked carefully, this medicine, is there any other danger? Don't worry, Bu Gao said calmly. This medicine has been tested on the spot for more than 10,000 times. As long as a person doesn't take more than 10, there'll be no problem. Zhao Lu asked curiously, what if it's more than 10? Bu Gao shrugged and said, it's best if you don't know. Besides, the average person can't eat more than 10 pieces, at most 1 or 2 pieces. If you can really accumulate 10 pieces, then I have to admire your disaster physique. You can meet us more than 10 times. Zhao Lu forced a smile. After I eat it, can I leave? Bu Gao nodded. Of course, you've already given your statement. We won't trouble you again in the future. At most, they would send someone to secretly observe and see if the fragment had any effect. That's good. Zhao Lu nodded. But at this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao walked in with Dong Xiaofeng. Bu Gao didn't dare to sit in such a wonderful posture. He quickly stood up. Come out for a while, Lu Mingho said to Bu Gao, then looked at Dong Xiaofeng and said calmly, I'll give you half an hour. They sat and looked at each other. There was a table's distance between them. Dong Xiaofeng and Zhao Lu didn't say anything first. Time passed little by little. Zhao Lu thought of I'll give you half an hour. Suddenly, Dong Xiaofeng took out his mobile phone. He took out the SIM card in front of Zhao Lu, then pressed the phone on the table and pushed it directly to Zhao Lu. The phone slipped out and slid into Zhao Li's arms. He frowned. What's the meaning of this? Dong Xiaofeng said calmly. Nothing. I'm just tired of playing with you. It's boring. Do you think I'll be so bored to play with you all the time? If I have the time, I might as well find a few more girls. Zhao Lu sneered. But it was a good thing that he handed over his mobile phone. This was probably the best thing that happened to him all day. Dong Xiaofeng said again, I've thrown away Ming Zhen's mobile phone. Xiang Chong is also dead. No one will find trouble with you in the future. Continue with your ordinary life. Thank you very much, Zhao Lu replied calmly. But he soon frowned, because he remembered something. That was the memory lapse. If he took this thing, Dong Xiaofeng might also take this medicine. If he forgot about it, then in the future would he? Don't worry, I won't take this medicine in the short term. Dong Xiaofeng seemed to have seen through Zhao Li's worries. He said casually, they said this medicine can only erase a few hours of memory. Even if I take it in the future, I won't forget what happened today. Zhao Li's expression became slightly better. He couldn't forget what Dong Xiaofeng did to him just because Dong Xiaofeng saved him in the end. At this moment, at most, he would treat it as a draw. He didn't want to have any more interactions with Dong Xiaofeng. Thinking of this, Zhao Lu didn't want to wait for half an hour. He reached out and grabbed the memory lapse in his hand. At the same time, he picked up the cup of water. Are you really going to eat it? Dong Xiaofeng asked suddenly. Zhao Lu was stunned. He subconsciously looked over and saw Dong Xiaofeng looking at him with bright eyes. What do you mean? If I don't eat it, how can I leave this place? Dong Xiaofeng said. If you eat it, you'll completely forget what happened. You won't remember the different things you've encountered, the extraordinary things you've encountered the other side of the world. I'm afraid you won't have such a chance in the future. Are you willing to be ordinary for the rest of your life? So what? Zhao Lu laughed. No matter how extraordinary things are, I'm just an ordinary person. Facing that so-called power, I don't even have the strength to resist. Even if I remember it, what's the use? Dong Xiaofeng said indifferently. I heard there's another way to deal with it. You've seen it too. People like Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao often travel around, and there are many people like them. This is a very large organization. Zhao Lu frowned. Dong Xiaofeng continued. Obviously, these people are capable people, and they can't do everything by themselves, so there must be an even larger team behind them to support their work. What do you mean? Zhao Li's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely understood Dong Xiaofeng's meaning. Dong Xiaofeng smiled and said, under normal circumstances, ordinary people who encounter events also have a chance to join this organization. Of course, not everyone can meet this condition. First of all, you have to be young, and you have to pass their test. Only after passing all aspects can you have a chance to join this organization. But generally, you're just a non-staff member. Although you're just a non-staff member, your life is completely different. A bigger world is waiting for you. As I said, these things have nothing to do with me. Zhao Lu shook his head. I'm just a very ordinary person, so ordinary that I don't dare to make mistakes. As I said before, you guys treated me like this, and I even thought of killing you. But in the end, I won't do that. I won't destroy myself. Dong Xiaofeng looked at Zhao Lu without saying a word. He just looked at him. Zhao Lu took a deep breath and suddenly laughed. He said in a self-deprecating manner, it's like what you have. I'm just an egg, which will break with a touch. You're a jade, which will be fine after you rub it. The world is so unfair. But so what? What I have, you may not have. I can be happy for a very ordinary meal, but for you, you may lose your appetite even if you put exotic delicacies in front of you. What I want is the happiness and happiness of ordinary people. I don't want to live in fear every day after becoming extraordinary, making my family worry. Do you know what kind of people are the most common in this world? Dong Xiaofeng subconsciously asked, ordinary people? Zhao Lu shook his head and said seriously, ordinary people. Dong Xiaofeng was startled and opened his mouth. Stunned, Zhao Lu directly opened his mouth and swallowed the capsule in his hand. He gulped it down with water without any hesitation. Dong Xiaofeng finally heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't spit out the words on the tip of his tongue. Thank you for saving me. This was the last sentence Zhao Lu said before he lost consciousness. Dong Xiaofeng shook his head and looked at Zhao Lu, who had fallen asleep on the table. Finally, he smiled bitterly. I still can't remember. If I had known, I wouldn't have lost weight. Not long after, Lu Mingho came in. Dong Xiaofeng stood up with his hands on the table. Please. Lu Mingho didn't say anything. Just take it as a reward for this smart kid. A cold wind blew and Zhao Lu shivered. He looked around and found that he was sitting in a park. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. But he soon remembered what had happened. That was Dong Xiaofeng had suddenly called him out, ruthlessly beat him up, and then returned all the things that he had used to blackmail him. Looking at the phone in his hand with the SIM card taken away, Zhao Lu still couldn't believe it. But he felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulder, which made him feel that it was real. But Zhao Lu felt that it was okay to let this guy beat him up and solve everything. But Dong Xiaofeng's sudden action really puzzled Zhao Lu. He had a lot of doubts in his heart, but he couldn't figure out the reason. Zhao Lu shook his head and looked at the time. It was already 7 o'clock in the evening. He couldn't help but feel nervous. He quickly stood up and ran out of the park. When he passed by the river, Zhao Lu hesitated for a moment. When he saw that there was no one around, he directly threw the silver pistol in his bag into the river and quickly left this place. Zhao Lu had just left when 2 black shadows suddenly came out from the side. One of them was unusually huge. They were Bu Bugao and Wang Hu. The administration wouldn't let Zhao Lu leave so easily. After all, they didn't know if the mysterious young man 24 would suddenly turn back in the afternoon and do something to hurt Zhao Lu, so there would be time to protect him temporarily. the task naturally fell on Bugao and Wang Hu. Bugao didn't mind doing more things to fight for the opportunity to show off. As for Wang Hu, he basically followed Bugao and took one step at a time. She seems to have thrown something. Wang Hu looked at the flowing river and said. Bugao yawned and said casually, maybe it's trash. It's really immoral. Wang Hu suddenly jumped into the water, but soon jumped out of the water. He wasn't wet, but he was holding a shoe that was about to rot in his hand. Wang Hu shook his head and casually tossed the thing that he had scooped up back in. Bugao directly pulled Wang Hu away. They were responsible for temporarily protecting Zhao Li's safety. When they arrived at the rehabilitation center, Zhao Li found his sister in the waiting area. After a day of recovery training, Zhang Xiaoqin seemed to be extremely tired. She leaned against the chair and fell asleep. Zhao Li sat down, but Zhang Xiaoqin was alerted. Little brother, you're here. I couldn't get through to your phone. I was so worried. My phone ran out of battery. Zhao Li smiled and said, I rushed over, but today is Friday. The traffic is bad. It's already so late. Zhang Xiaoqin saw that Zhao Li was fine, so she naturally felt relieved and didn't continue to ask. Let's go and eat. I'll celebrate for you. Zhao Li smiled and then took out the prepared gift from his bag. Sister, happy birthday. Thank you. This was enough to be happy. Zhang Xiaoqin showed a happy smile. Later, Wei Zidao came to the room temporarily arranged for Dong Xiaofeng. The reason why he let Zhao Li leave was that he considered that Zhao Li could only be regarded as half a participant in the whole matter. Dong Xiaofeng's body had the remaining power of 24. If the mysterious young man really wanted to find trouble, he should find Dong Xiaofeng. So, in the eyes of Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao, the person who needed more protection was Dong Xiaofeng. It's probably not comparable to home, but it's not bad. You can only stay here for a few days. It's safer. Wei Zidao smiled slightly. If you need anything, you can tell me. Dong Xiaofeng nodded. There was not even a window here. He looked at the clock on the wall and suddenly asked, Is there a candle? Candle? Wei Zidao was stunned. Chapter 1209. In a narrow and neat basement, the crows kept cawing. The young man walked out of the dim bathroom with bandages wrapped around his body. He casually threw out the towel, used to wipe his sweat, and covered the birdcage. The crows stopped cawing. The young man slumped on the sofa. His eyes were still lifeless, but his lips would twitch a few times from time to time. What he had learned could ensure that he would not die in that kind of situation where his ribs pierced his lungs, but it could not heal his injuries quickly. After all, the curse technique did not have any healing properties. I didn't expect. 24 slumped on the sofa and said to himself, It seems that it is a bit difficult to recover to a certain level. Well, he was an extremely lazy person. He even felt that thinking about problems was a waste of time, so he chose to sleep. Let's move to another place after I wake up, 24 subconsciously thought, and gradually his consciousness sank into the dream. You have 5 missed calls. When he returned home, Chen Mingming turned on his phone. There were 5 missed calls, 3 from Zhou Yuxing and 2 from his mother. In addition, there was a message from Zhou Yuxing. I want to discuss the issue of going abroad again. There was also a message from his mother. I need to hand over the company's affairs, so I may come back very late. Don't wait. He was alone in his house again. With the lamp on, Chen Mingming sat in front of the table. In front of the table, there was a silver pistol placed there when he came in. The pistol was bound to him. It could be lent, but it would not be lost. It returned to this place naturally because Zhao Li had discarded it. But in the end, not everyone would choose the most extreme method. Chen Mingming picked up the silver pistol with a complicated smile on his face. Then, he made it disappear again. It could appear or disappear according to his thoughts. It is really amazing, something that can only happen in fantasy. Chen Mingming thought to himself. Logically speaking, or more accurately speaking, from the moment he obtained it, he shouldn't have been so calm. He himself didn't know when his heart had become so unperturbed. Maybe it started when he met the figure on the riverbank that seemed to be very close to him, but also seemed to be very far away. Perhaps it was even earlier. Chen Mingming always felt that he had forgotten something since he was sent away by the servant girl. He tried to think if there was anything he had forgotten, but when he thought about it carefully, There was nothing in his memory that couldn't be connected. Chun Mingming sat down quietly as he recalled the last words the boss had said to him. The two parchment scrolls were placed on the desk. If they were not opened, they would disappear with time. If they were to open, you would only have 5 days to complete the task. Chun Mingming remained silent. The moment he obtained the pistol, he didn't feel too excited. He just felt that it was magical. When he confirmed that it indeed had the ability to kill people from a distance without leaving any traces, he didn't feel too moved. He even vaguely felt that this was reasonable enough. However, when those countless lights and shadows floated in front of him, watching every minute and second of the world, an unprecedented throbbing in his soul caused him to not be as calm as he appeared to be. He had always been very decisive in doing things. This was a character that he had cultivated since he was young. Therefore, he opened the first parchment scroll and carefully read the floating words on it. The boss had said that this was the background information and test questions for the assessment. Today, a dismembered body case happened in the city. The deceased, Wang Liang, was dismembered and hidden in a rented house. Chun Mingming subconsciously frowned. Regarding this case, it had caused a sensation. He had also learned about this matter from the internet. Chun Mingming controlled his impatience and continued reading. At the same time, a similar dismembered body case happened in another place. The deceased, Wu Rong, was Wang Liang's girlfriend. The words on the parchment scroll were written one after another, detailing the relationship between Wang Liang and Wu Rong, as well as Wang Liang's entanglement with several other women, including Zhang Xiaoqin's attempted suicide. Chun Mingming felt that the content on the parchment scroll was almost all the information the police had on the two dismembered body cases so far. The key person, Zhao Le. These are the last words on the parchment scroll. Chun Mingming waited for a moment. When he didn't see any new words, he began to open the second parchment scroll. This should be the test questions. There were 2 questions. Requirement 1. Assist Zhou Yuxing to find a real murderer. Requirement 2. Learn to cry. Chun Mingming didn't feel too surprised about the first requirement. From the content of the first parchment scroll, it was naturally related to the 2 dismembered body cases. However, the first requirement made Chun Mingming silent for a long time. After a long time, Chun Mingming picked up the phone and had a plan in mind. Since the first requirement was to assist Zhou Yuxing in solving the case, it was not suitable for him to investigate in secret. Even if he was doing the same thing, it didn't mean that it would be more efficient to do it separately. The key was how to persuade Zhou Yuxing to participate in this case. The key person, Zhao. Chun Mingming looked at the last words on the first parchment scroll and waited for the call to be connected. Hello, Mingming? Why are you calling me at this time? Can I ask you for a favor? He accepted the test question. Yu was making a glass of wine for Luoqiu. Luoqiu seemed to be looking forward to it. He directly made the wine and slowly pushed it in front of him. Luoqiu picked up the cup and sniffed it, saying softly, Meng Po. I improved a little. The servant girl chuckled. Meng Po was too sad, so I added some orange juice. The taste should be much better. Luoqiu tasted it. This was the final product of the Daylily series. This was the prototype of Meng Po's soup. If it was allowed to work, it would probably give him a good dream, right? Luoqiu slowly closed his eyes. The old gramophone in the corner also started to play at this time. Is that Dong Xiaofeng asleep? In the middle of the night, the 2 agents of the agency were still working overtime. Lu Mingho was writing the report of the battle with the mysterious young man, 24 today. How many bullets were used, what spells were used, how much damage was caused, the number of casualties, and so on, all needed to be reported in detail, especially the suggestions for dealing with the aftermath. After the suggestions were sent, the agency would have a special evaluation. After the evaluation passed, it would be handed over to the logistics department to deal with, and the whole process would be completed within 48 hours. In short, one of the most important purposes of the agency was to cover up the influence of the supernatural on society as quickly as possible. Wei Zidao brought 2 cups of coffee and sat down, saying casually, that guy went to sleep after celebrating his birthday. Birthday? Lu Mingho was stunned and stopped. Wei Zidao shrugged, saying, "It seems to be today, right? It's just past 12. This may be the most unforgettable birthday for this guy." Lu Mingho drank the coffee and seemed to be more energetic. "I didn't expect that this guy would want to participate in the assessment of the logistics department." Wei Zidao smiled, saying, "Brother Hao, didn't you mention it on purpose? When he asked us how to deal with Zhao Lu, it was you who accidentally mentioned several different ways to deal with him, right?" Lu Mingho smiled. There were some things that they didn't tell Dong Xiaofeng, and that was about the foreign energy left in his body. This strange power transmitted from Xiang Chong's dagger to Dong Xiaofeng did leave some of it in Dong Xiaofeng's body, and it was sealed by Lu Mingho himself, but it wasn't impossible to get rid of it, as Lu Mingho said. Although the foreign energy was strange, it wasn't impossible to get rid of it on the spot. After all, there was only a small amount of it left. No matter how strange the energy was, it couldn't escape the law of strength and quantity. No matter how strong a football was, a small iron ball wouldn't be heavier than a card of cotton. I didn't expect that the foreign energy left in Dong Xiaofeng's body would cause some strange changes in his body. Lu Mingho frowned, saying, "I found that his somatic cell activity increased greatly, 3 times that of a normal person. He probably doesn't know that his physical fitness has far surpassed that of some top athletes. It's a blessing in disguise." Wei Zidao smiled, saying, "Under the effect of the seal, I don't know how much this power will improve his body, but no matter how much, he is obviously no longer an ordinary person." Lu Mingho nodded, saying, "The Bureau is short of people now. Recently, they have started to select some talented people from the National Army. As for us, we also have the obligation to find talents among the people. I hope that this time Dong Xiaofeng will give us a little surprise. This kid is very smart and calm. Think about it, and he may be useful." Wei Zidao smiled. Lu Mingho sighed and then asked, "By the way, how's the information about this mysterious young man?" Wei Zidao said seriously, "I have searched the Bureau's database, but didn't find the existence of this person. Whether it's his abilities, weapons, or even the way he attacked, there's no record of him at all. There's not even a reference. In other words, it's all blank." Lu Mingho frowned and said seriously, "This is troublesome. Although the world is big, we have collected information about Kelowna transcendent Taoists and even some foreign transcendent Taoists over the years." At this time, Lu Mingho received an email. He glanced at it and said, "The orders from the top have approved Dong Xiaofeng's participation in the assessment, approved the arrest of 24, and asked that we try to capture him alive. But we don't have enough people." Wei Zidao said with difficulty. Lu Mingho said, "There are also temporary orders to delay the arrival of Bubu Gao and temporarily assist us." "Bubu Gao?" Wei Zidao frowned, saying, "This kid is nothing. But this Wang Hu, I keep feeling that there is something wrong. Brother Hao, this Wang Hu doesn't look like an ordinary Taoist, no matter how you look at him." Lu Mingho said, "I have checked Wang Hu's information. He's indeed logged in, but only recently. But his previous information is also blank. But many Taoists lurk deep in the mountains and forests, and there are many cases of them suddenly appearing. But usually, they have to go through an investigation, assessment, and a period of observation before they are approved to be sent to support logistics. I don't know what method this Bubu Gao used to let Wang Hu pass so easily." Wei Zidao shook his head and joked, saying, "Could it be that he got the young lady from the Human Resources Department in his bed? Who cares?" Lu Mingho had been in the Bureau for a longer time, and he had seen many strange things in the Bureau. "Since there is no problem with the file, we can just use it. This 24 has a mysterious background, and his combat power is not ordinary, but Wang Hu was able to suppress him with brute force. This is obviously a good thing for us." Wei Zidao nodded. "Oh, right, the settlement plan has also been approved." Lu Mingho looked at the new email on the computer again, saying, "Tomorrow morning, go to the police station and visit Bureau Chief Lu. Tell him that the case of the prisoner in the detention center and Changshao can be closed. We have found the prisoner, so let him withdraw the case." "Understood." Early in the morning, why don't you go in? Facing this frequent visitor of the criminal police team 1 and the afternoon tea delivery man, Lin Feng felt that he was under a lot of pressure. Miss Rin, you also know that this case has a lot of attention from the higher-ups. We can't reveal it casually. Rin Xiling said unhappily. I didn't even go to the crime scene, and it was almost a week before I came over. I even brought breakfast for you. Other reporters have already dug up all kinds of gossip, but you guys are so good, you don't even leave me any leftovers to eat. How can you be like this? If it were other reporters, we would have kicked them out, no matter who they were. But Lin Feng didn't dare to say that, so he could only continue to greet this lady with a bitter face. Even though she had restrained herself a lot, which even made Sir Ma feel that this lady had changed her temperament. While Nanny Run was showing her true nature, Lin Feng was having a hard time dealing with her. But in the corridor, a cold, short-haired woman in a suit walked slowly. It was a kind of compensation. Looking at the short-haired woman's black stockings, Officer Lin felt that today was not too bad. Who is she? Ren Xiling couldn't help but ask curiously. Oh, the first forensic doctor in the police station, Lin Feng said casually. Her name is Nan Xiaonan. She's just been here for a few days, so you haven't seen her before. The new forensic doctor? Nanny Ren rolled her eyes and then directly took back the breakfast bag in Lin Feng's hand. Well, I'm leaving. You can go back now. But breakfast? I'd rather eat than give it to you bastards. Eat by yourself. How can you be so realistic? Chapter 12:10. Almost instantly, Nan Xiaonan considered many things. Based on past experience, there would more or less be people blessed by the heavens in different eras of the subworld. They would have unimaginable luck. Simply put, they were people who could reach the peak of the world. This type of person was either a genius or someone with a firm will. However, in the same era, how many geniuses and firm wills were there? So why were there people who could reach the peak in the end, and why were there people who achieved nothing their whole lives? Time, fate, luck. Unknowingly, the will of fate favored certain people. The only difference was the degree of favor and the amount of protection. Nan Xiaonan was also the type who had been protected by the world in the past. Otherwise, she would not have been able to reach the peak of her own world and finally grasp a sliver of a chance to escape the shackles of the subworld. Back then, the protection she had from the will of the world was only the protection of a region, but it had already given her endless possibilities. She really could not imagine how powerful the protection of an entire world could be. She was definitely the child of the world. However, Nan Xiaonan could faintly feel that this woman was somewhat different from the true child of the world. The true child of the world was definitely the person who led an entire generation forward, the carrier who could change the structure of the entire world, the person who could influence the people around them at all times, and the person who could move in a certain direction. But on Ren Xiling, Nan Xiaonan only felt the protection of the will of the world. Moreover, she was very sure that this woman was just an ordinary person. At most, she was very healthy, and her constitution was a little better than ordinary people, but not out of the ordinary. This made Nan Xiaonan puzzled, even after much thought. The protection of an entire subworld is just for protection. Nan Xiaonan was not only shocked when she came to this conclusion, but also felt that it was inconceivable. As the time she spent in this subworld increased, she felt more and more that this subworld was dangerous. First, Nan Xiaonan sensed a super powerful creature that was not any weaker than her main body. Then, she sensed a huge dark intent that she could only submit to. Today, she met a woman who was protected by the will of an entire subworld. Nan Xiaonan really wondered if her luck was too bad. Another possibility was that even if she had fused with the native soul of this subworld and managed to stay, she would still be discovered by the will of this subworld. And this woman who had the protection of the will of the child world was influenced by the will of the child world, which was why she approached him. We can't expose ourselves. In an instant, Nan Xiaonan had already made a decision. Any contact with this kind of person who was protected by the will of the world would be an extremely dangerous thing for stowaways. However, what Nan Xiaonan didn't expect was that she would still run into this strange woman when she returned to her office after circling around for a long time. In the office, Xiao Bao was happily eating the breakfast brought by Ren Xiling. At this time, When he saw Nan Xiaonan come in, he directly greeted her. "Good morning, Section Chief Nan." "So this is Section Chief Nan." Ren Xiling smiled. Obviously, she had already gotten Nan Xiaonan's information for Xiao Bao. Nanny Ren was holding a steaming bun and greeted her warmly. "Come, don't be polite. Have some breakfast first. Don't come near me." Although she was roaring in her heart, Nan Xiaonan still said calmly, "I have already eaten. Thank you." "Xiao Bao, this is?" "She is Aunt Ren, Sister Ren." Under Ren Xiling's caring gaze, Xiao Bao quickly changed the way he addressed her. "Hello." Nan Xiaonan nodded, then walked back to her seat and sat down. Ren Xiling gave Xiao Bao a warning look at this time. The latter shrank his head in fear and then quietly minimized the game interface. Nanny Ren walked to Nan Xiaonan with a smile and said seriously, "Forensic Dr. Nan, what do you think about the recent dismembered corpse case?" Nan Xiaonan was stunned. She didn't know why this woman would ask about this matter, but she thought that since this woman could walk around freely in the bureau, she probably had a position. She had only been here for a few days, and she didn't visit every department. It was not strange that she didn't know them. Nan Xiaonan just wanted to send her away without showing any flaws as soon as possible. She felt that it was too dangerous here, so she considered whether she should transfer. While thinking, Nan Xiaonan said casually, "Well, at present, it seems that the two dismembered corpse cases were done by the same person. According to the scene of the murderer should be an extremely rational person." She slowly said all the speculations about the murderer so far, and occasionally mixed in some of her own personal opinions. Nanny Rin kept nodding and memorizing it in her notebook. One question, one answer. Time passed unknowingly. Only Xiao Bao's face became more and more strange and ugly. In the end, he didn't even look at her. "I'm afraid that Sir Ma will beat me to death if he knows." Finally, Ren Xiling left with a satisfied smile and said that she would come often in the future. Nan Xiaonan secretly heaved a sigh of relief. With this woman, who was suspected to be the child of the world, standing beside her, she felt as if the will of the child of the world was staring at her all the time. She was already drenched in cold sweat. "By the way, Xiao Bao, which department is this Ren? Sister Ren from? Why haven't I seen her before?" Nan Xiaonan made up her mind to avoid this department as much as possible. As for the transfer, it should also be put on the agenda. Xiao Bao sighed at this time. "Well, Chief Nan, she's not from our department. She's just a reporter." Nan Xiaonan slightly opened her mouth and then frowned. "Reporter?" Xiao Bao hurriedly said, "But it doesn't matter. She's a bit special. Even if the higher-ups know that you've said so much, they won't say anything. If you don't say anything, no one will know." Nan Xiaonan seemed to be relieved and nodded. "So that's how it is. So he's just a reporter. Fortunately, he's not from the unit. But why would an ordinary human reporter, not someone who can lead an era, be protected by the world?" She couldn't figure out the ins and outs of the matter. On this side, seeing Nan Xiaonan let out a sigh of relief at this moment, Xiao Bao, who didn't know the reason for her sigh of relief, also felt a little relieved. Thus, the two people with different thoughts started a new day of work. But what Xiao Bao didn't know was that Nan Xiaonan had already begun to apply for a transfer. To be safe, a slight mistake could lead to eternal damnation. Looking at the information she got from Nan Xiaonan with satisfaction, Nanny Run was about to leave proudly. But when she passed by the reception room, she accidentally saw a young man sitting inside. Ren Xiling was a bit curious about this young man and couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. Why is this little guy? Looking at the young man who was staring out of the window in a daze, Ren Xiling's mind wandered for a moment. Instantly, 3 or 4 years ago, when her husband left, the image of the child who was like an empty shell seemed to overlap with this image. "Ren Xiling, why are you here?" But in the next moment, a surprised voice woke Ren Xiling up. Nanny Ren was startled and saw Ma Howd walking quickly towards her. "You got the wrong person." Ren Xiling didn't dare to stay any longer. She turned around and ran towards the stairs. "Wait, don't run. I have something to ask you." Sir Ma quickly chased after her. Zhou Yuxing, who came with him, frowned at this time. Looking at the back of the fleeing figure, he didn't know why, but he seemed to feel a little sad. So she's Captain Luo's. Zhou Yuxing took a deep breath. After taking the new medicine from Gawain these days, his condition seemed to be better than before. It seemed that he was getting better day by day. The depression that accumulated in his heart seemed to have cleared a lot, and the symptoms of his headache were not as frequent as before, although he still couldn't remember what happened at the end of the case a few years ago. For Zhou Yuxing, although he had forgotten how he fought with the gangsters and how they both fell off the building, he didn't forget what happened before. It was that dazzling man who helped him break free from the quagmire in an instant and made him stop resting. Over the years, Zhou Yuxing would go to Captain Luo's grave once a month, insisting on reporting his work. He was very grateful to the man who saved him, even if he was buried in the ground forever. Zhou Yuxing wanted him to know that he didn't fail to live up to the oath he made before he joined the force. After calming down, Zhou Yuxing walked into the reception room. The young man sitting there was Chun Mingming. Chun Mingming was thinking about how to persuade Zhou Yuxing to let him participate in this case. This was basically impossible, but Chun Mingming had a plan in mind and thought of a reason. The small commotion outside the conference room just now didn't affect Chun Mingming's thinking. At this time, seeing that Zhou Yuxing finally came in, he was about to speak directly. Unexpectedly, Zhou Yuxing said at this time, "So you were here. It took me a while to find you. Well, don't be lazy. The meeting is about to start. Go get ready." Meeting? Chun Mingming frowned, feeling a little confused by Zhou Yuxing's words. Zhou Yuxing nodded and said, "Yes, meeting. Yesterday, I asked you to reorganize the case report of the dismembered body case. Have you finished it?" Chun Mingming opened his mouth in surprise and was about to say something. At this time, Zhou Yuxing suddenly came forward and frowned. "You child, you're not a person who usually forgets things. Why did you throw your ID on the ground?" Zhou Yuxing bent down to pick up the ID and then stuffed it into Chun Mingming's hand. Chun Mingming looked at the ID in his hand, and his pupils contracted slightly. On the ID, his photo was so clear. This was the ID with his identity written, member of the second team. When did I become a police officer?" Chun Mingming asked subconsciously. Zhou Yuxing looked at Chun Mingming strangely, then smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "When?" "Last year, I saw you take the oath with my own eyes." Last year, in an instant, Chun Mingming had already understood. So, it turned out that he had already arranged his identity. No wonder the case information was so carefully written on the parchment. Even the identity was directly prepared. But he didn't know if this was only changing Zhou Yuxing's memory or the entire police stations from the time he opened the parchment until now. It had only been one night, and already it seemed that he had underestimated the ability of the boss. But this was also good. After all, according to the actual situation, no matter what reason was used to participate in the case, Chun Mingming felt that it was very far-fetched. He was not even sure that he could persuade Zhou Yuxing to agree. After that, Chun Mingming walked out of the reception room with Zhou Yuxing. After that, he couldn't help but be curious. In this modified relationship, what was the situation between his father and his mother now? Along the way, he met many people. While they greeted Zhou Yuxing, they also nodded at him, as if they were already very familiar with him, and said something like father, like son. Chun Mingming finally knew that he had indeed been integrated into this system. Ren Xiling, "Don't run. Stop right there." After chasing her all the way to the parking lot, Sir Ma was already a little out of breath. Finally, after Ren Xiling hid in his Mini, he stopped her. "Why are you running?" Sir Ma asked angrily. I have something urgent to do, can't I?" Ren Xiling was considering whether she should step on the gas pedal hard. "What urgent? Forget it. Let's not talk about this. There's something I need to tell you." Ma Hao wiped his sweat and said, "I was on a look for you 2 days later, but you just showed up. Lung Feng will be here in a few days, and I might not have time. Can you see if you have time to go and pick up the plane?" "Dumbo is coming." Ren Xiling was stunned. She was a little confused. The last time she saw him was only a few days ago, and that was because of the geological disaster at Mount Tai. "Yeah," Ma Hao nodded. Lung Feng said that he's preparing to be transferred, and I haven't been able to contact him for a while. Moreover, I've been away for a long time. Coincidentally, there's a short break before the transfer, so I decided to come back and meet an old friend. I see. Run, Xiling nodded. Okay, tell me the time, and I'll pick him up. Luochio is also coming back. When did little Luo Chio come back? Ma Haod was stunned, and then he said angrily, "Why didn't you tell me? I saw that you were busy, so I didn't tell you." Run Xiling shrugged and said, "Anyway, you can take some time to come over during the meal. You will be able to see it." "Okay, that's fine." Ma Haod nodded and sighed. "I'm so tired. I didn't even know why you were running, and I had to chase after you. I thought you knew that I got a lot of money from Nan Xiaonan and what? You're with Nan Xiaonan. Don't run." Boom! The bright red Mini finally stepped on the accelerator. In the capital, Lung Feng was packing his things in the camp. After the Mount Tai incident, he accepted the transfer to that department and would participate in the training of that department. There was no doubt that he would come into contact with a whole new field. He was a soldier, and his duty was to protect the country. Therefore, after receiving the order from the top, he did not hesitate at all. However, before that, the organization gave him a short break. After all, if he really joined that department, it would be difficult for him to have a break in the future. "Brother Luo, I haven't seen your son for a long time. I wonder how he looks now. I still remember when you brought him to the army to train. I didn't expect that more than 10 years had passed."